G'day guys, welcome to the Origin Canine podcast, where our mission is to enhance the full life cycle of working canines and handlers. The podcast is now available on YouTube and all major podcast platforms. If you're looking for our Australian-made tactical canine equipment, go to origincanine.com. Enjoy the show. G'day guys, welcome to another episode of the Origin Canine podcast. Today I've got another Aussie guest on. We've got Reg Ramage. Reg is a former canine handler from the canine handler from the first military police. For fuck's sake, the first military police battalion.
G'day guys.
Fucked it already.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough. It's too many words, mate. Too many words. No,
Mate, you know,
okay.
I think it's the headphones, dude. Because when I would normally just have the laptop, and I don't have these hanging out, and I've just got a
Yep.
microphone.
Yeah,
But
okay.
now I'm using the headphones. It's like you can hear your voice back, and you just I don't know. Anyway,
No, good. You see, actually, I'm hearing that now, mate. So, well, we'll get through it, I'm sure.
yeah, sweet. It's definitely nothing to do with me. It's probably COVID or the war in Ukraine or
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
cryptocurrency or Twitter or something.
It's definitely the 5G,
Yeah,
mate.
yeah. Anyway, bro. Well, mate, welcome to the show, dude. Thanks for coming on, man. Um,
No, awesome.
and mate, so I usually like to start by going back to your childhood and just hearing a bit about you growing up, like where you grew up, and then how that shaped you joining the military, and then if there's something about dogs in there that sort of got you interested early, hit us with that, mate.
Yeah, okay. So, mate, I had a pretty interesting childhood, to say the least, and I'll probably keep it as brief as I possibly can. But I've lived in lots of places. I was born in Tamworth, country music capital of Australia. Obviously, don't remember much of that. I left there about 8 years old and moved into Queensland. Um, uh, to be honest, without reason, my mother was a bit of a gypsy, so we moved around quite a lot. Spent the time in Eagleby, Mount Gravatt, Lowood, all these areas down to southeast Queensland, even up to the Sunshine Coast there for a little bit of time. Um, During that time, mate, I guess a lot of my time was spent with horses more than dogs. I did spend a bit of time with dogs as well. I was mainly the kind of horse stuff we did was horse shows, sort of Western events and those kind of things, which, mate, to be honest, I really love and I miss. One day I might just get a horse just for the fun of it. But yeah, it was sort of more the horses rather than dogs. There was a time, though, a little time when I was, I don't know, maybe 13, 14 years old, I started to train a border collie we had there. And oh, mate, I did all right for a kid who had no idea what he was doing. And that was probably my first introduction to using food without any knowledge of understanding what that meant in the I guess, the psychology side of things and the behaviours. But yeah, I
What
guess,
year? What year was that? Sorry, mate.
yep, you're right. Keep going.
Oh, I was just asking what year was that when you were doing that stuff with the
Oh,
food and whatnot?
two, well, it wouldn't be 2000 and anything. That would have been 94.
Okay.
Yeah, so a long time ago. And, I mean, it was just teaching as you know, mate, border collies are switched on animals, so they don't take much training. So it was, yeah, good dog. But most of my life, mate, I've had Dobermans as dogs. We had a couple of German Shepherds there for a while. We had to get rid of one, unfortunately, because he ended up chewing on a bloody truck driver one day, trying to protect my mother at the time, because not for anything bad
Shit.
was happening. This poor bastard come in and shoved his hand in the window to help my mother with the car, and my dogs ended up chewing on him. I think, yeah, I can't remember. He was a big white German Shepherd. His name was Jed. That's, mate, their childhood memory, so they might be a little bit exaggerated, but I remember at the time it was a pretty big deal. Yeah,
Was it
but
a bad chew?
oh, I don't know, mate. I know it was enough to. Yeah, I guess that guy won't be sticking his arms in any windows anytime soon. Yeah, but yeah, I guess for me, mate, what got me into dogs was more that relationship between animal and human, and I've always had that, rather than just a dog itself. But how did I end up in the military? That's a long story in itself, and I'll give you a very short version. I guess when I was
We got
a young fellow, was my mum sort of said, "Don't get a tattoo, don't ride a motorcycle, don't join the army." I've done all three things, but that wasn't actually on purpose. But at the time, mate, I was a musician of all things, working as a detailer for my wife's father, sort of my girlfriend at the time. And I had to sort of go. I wanted to marry that lady, and her name's Jess, and I needed to sort of give my father-in-law the confidence that I was going to do something with my life rather than go around pubs singing songs and detailing cars. So I decided to join the army, and that's how I ended up in the army, mate.
Yeah, so because we got time, bro. What's the long version? Is there like a longer version, or is it you just
Yeah,
skipping
there's.
some unnecessary details?
I guess, mate, the life I lived as a child was one that I didn't want to live as an adult. And I mean that is, I guess, without getting too soppy and philosophical, I guess I've been a guy that's been drank the Kool-Aid of loyalty, honor, respect, all those things that we speak about and really see done or do ourselves. And I didn't come from a good background in those areas. So I guess I made it in my mind that I didn't want to be any of those things that I guess, was an example to me as a child. Um, and so and that's why I guess in the end I ended up in the military police after a bit of time. But I wanted to do good by people, not to dobble me mates, which we all get the big brand on, but to hopefully to hopefully support and do what I can in those areas.
I didn't say anything.
No, yeah. So yeah. So that's probably the reason, mate, is just to make a big change. I mean, a very big is a hard right from the person oh, not the person, yeah, the person I was and the life I was leading to going in the military, mate. I don't know if everyone's got a similar story. I think probably week 3 or week 4 at Kapuka, mate, I was keen to get out of that. I said, oh, I've made a big mistake here. But I also had a very, what's the word, um, influential and very convincing section commander at the time, who had me stay to the end. So
Yeah, awesome, man. So obviously you're sort of alluding to like a bit of trauma there in your childhood, and we don't have to go into it, but is that the sort of stuff that made you go, hey, that was probably a bad example of a male role model or a female role model? You know, the army itself is interesting, so that's probably something that drew a young bloke like you to the army. And
yep,
then was the military police, you sort of had that background from your childhood and you were like, if I'm going to do the cool thing in the army, which
yep,
is the army, but
yep.
if I'm in the army, I want to go chase the people that I saw as a negative influence on my life. Is that what you're sort of alluding to?
That's that's a pretty. You've got it, mate. Pretty much spot on.
Okay, yeah, sweet.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Okay, cool. So you actually joined as an MP, right? So you didn't join as anything else. You just went straight to MPs.
No, no, mate. I joined as and don't judge me too harshly, but I joined as infantry. I got about week 5. I said, you know what? I really don't enjoy this. So and I decided to go to core transfer at Kapuka, which is to transport. So I spent probably the first 6 years of or 5 or 6 years of my career in transport, never doing a transport posting. I went straight from Kapuka to Pukapunga to do my basic driver's course, and then
Yep.
posted to First Field Regiment, which is now 1 regiment up in Brisbane. And basically, mate, we were glorified gun numbers as a result. I mean, we were the first or RECT drivers to be posted into that unit. Normally, artillery drivers were associated with those tasks, but they made them transport positions. So I'm sure you can imagine the type of welcome we received. But over time, mate, as with most units, we put in the hard yards. We earned our stripes per se, and we became part of the team as well. So if I was to sort of say if there was the hardest time of my time in the army physically and mentally would have been those 4 years in one field regiment. But at the same time, mate, it was a blast. And as you know, through that trauma bonding and those hard time sort of opportunities that you're with your mates, you build some really strong relationships, which I'm still mates with those guys today. I mean, that's 20, 21 years later. So it shows you a lot for the type of relationships and bonds you build in the army in such a short period of time. From there, mate, I guess I was a bit of a found myself on the wrong side of the law on a number of times there, which was interesting. But because I guess I was riding a motorcycle. Oh, hello. Sorry, mate. You got me? Yeah, sorry, mate.
Yeah, it's all good.
Where'd you have me
I
laugh?
think the bloody we were just talking about that 4 years in the army. You said it was the hardest physically, mentally sort of period that you had. I think every now and then, if this thing shits itself, it starts recording automatically again, so it'll
Oh,
just
okay.
save in segments. So
Okay, all right.
we'll just fucking continue on as if
Yeah,
nothing happened. I
yeah.
think it's fine, mate.
All right, too easy.
Yeah,
So, mate, yeah, I mean, at the same time, like I said, they were the best relationships I've ever had. Good men, good leaders, and I say men because that's all we had there at the time. It's some really good leaders that I've certainly modelled some of my behaviours off as a result, and I've also some leaders that weren't so great that I've learnt from as well. Um, but yeah, I really enjoyed that time that I had at One Field Regiment. It's funny I say that because at the time none of us wanted to be there, but when we left there, we all went, geez, it wasn't that bad. Yeah, we had some hard days, but geez, we had a good time when we weren't having hard days. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And for people listening, the like the artillery regiments and the cavalry regiments, they're notoriously like regimental and very strict and steeped in ceremony and that type of stuff, right?
yeah, yeah, definitely. And
Yeah,
they're hard on it, mate. They don't back off on it, and I guess that put a lot of those values in me. I guess I backed it off a bit moving forward, but yeah, I mean, like we had every Wednesday we'd have a admin parade. Every Thursday before sporties we'd have a full admin parade before sporties, and all those kind of things. Morning parades, afternoon parades, all those sort of things, and most of the units I've been to since don't do any of those things unless there's something special
yeah.
going on. Yeah.
I did not know about the Wednesday parades, and I know there's sports on a Thursday and whatnot.
Yeah.
It's going to turn the Wi-Fi off from my other devices. Hopefully, it's not going to. I can die. Um, yeah, I know that some units have like the sport on the Thursday, but in my career, that was always really haphazard. It was like very occasionally.
Yeah, yeah,
But like the
yeah.
admin parades on a Wednesday, ugh, fuck that.
That's right, exactly, mate. No, it's yeah, I certainly didn't enjoy it, but I guess they're fond memories to look back on. Is in when you get out of the army or spend a bit of time as you have, mate, you just sort of go those values and those ceremonial things. I guess they're things that have been lost in a long time, and I guess um, you'll never do that again. So whether that be for good or for worse, there are still those times where, yep, we have traditions, we have values, and we stick to them.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, man. Like I used to hate that stuff, right? I was always one of those guys that was like, why do we waste our time with this stupid stuff, and why can't we just roll our sleeves up? And I was that guy. But
Yeah,
it's almost like the older I get, I think I have more of an appreciation for what that
yeah,
actually means.
yeah,
That discipline, the tradition, and those values is about the principle as opposed to the actual dogmatic.
yeah,
This is why
yeah.
we march around and
Yeah, that's
yeah,
right, exactly. Yeah, no, I get it, mate. It's
doing the
and I was
robot.
the same, mate. I'm a pretty relaxed dude. That's classic. Yeah, so it's but I guess when you go into those other units that went away, which I think was good to a point because we got to concentrate on what I what I enjoyed, which was practicing the war bit and doing the things that I guess what the nation expects us to do, and that's apply violence on behalf of the country. And don't get me wrong, I see it. That other side of the business, being the traditional side of the business, has its place for that in the foundations of it. But I really like just getting out there and doing the job, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah, I think I was probably one of those kind of guys, right?
Yeah,
What year was this when you joined? So by the end of that, so what year did you join? And then
99.
by the end of
So not
your,
yeah, 99 I joined, and then when did I leave? I left one reg in the end of 2003.
oh right, so fuck, in that time that you've joined the unit, um, you've got Timor, September 11, Afghanistan, and Iraq all
Yeah,
sort of kicking off in that time. What's
yeah.
that like being
Well, it
a
was
fucking
exciting.
pogue?
It was exciting times for me. Exactly right, mate. Like in that time, I did get posted to East Timor, and in 2001. So I was attached to a UN mission, FLS 4, which is Force Logistics Squadron 4, as a heavy vehicle operator, which was great, mate. For me personally, as a driver in East Timor, we got to see more country than anybody. So we'd go all the way to the border, up to Balabo and Batagade and Moliana, all the way up to Los Palos, all the way to the Far East, and supporting Koreans, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Japanese, the Malaysians, Thais, Jordanians. So it was for a young fella who's only literally 2 years from basic training to get posted straight into that position, and I was the only one from one reg to get deployed because I had the right qualifications. Was fantastic, mate, and certainly gave me an early perspective of what hard is and what a hard life is. I guess when you look at that third world country and how happy people can be when they've got nothing, it is probably the big perspective I got.
Mate, that's a very interesting point, and I'd love to explore it, but it would
Yeah,
be such a segue from
yeah, that's
your
right.
story. The
Yeah,
whole because you know Dan Cooper, ex regiment guy.
yep.
I saw a post that he put up the other day, and it was like, hey, have you ever wondered if the Taliban or if the Afghanis have PTSD, depression, or whatever? And he's like, they may do, but I think the point he was making was like they've got so little and they've got such hardship in their life, they don't have fucking time
Yeah,
for that
yeah,
shit. They've just got to survive. And what you just said there resonated with me a lot because
yeah,
it's almost like the lower down on that Maslow's hierarchy of needs that you
yep,
go, the more basic your requirements are, the less
yep.
you have to worry about the airy fairy stuff in your head.
Yeah,
Not to
agreed, mate.
say that it's not real, but I think necessity will fucking push that stuff out because you've got to
Yeah,
survive. So
yeah, and it does, mate. I mean, I'm sure you've seen plenty of examples where necessity pushes past your discomfort, on many times, whether it be physically or mentally. That necessity and I guess internal sort of what's the word, behaviours takes over, and we just get on with it, and we'll deal with this other stuff later on. Free medical, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, free dental, mate. I've seen fucking.
Yeah,
Gosh, I've got a bit of a toothache
yeah,
at the moment,
but
so I got to go back to dental. But
but no, Timor was great, mate. That was 6 month tours, and a tour of being I guess the only bloke from my unit. I had to sort of find myself and my spot there, and um, got to spend some time in Akusi, which is the little enclave in West Timor. That was great, mate. We got up to had some really good times there, moving some North Koreans into that. Oh, sorry, not North Koreans, some South Koreans into that area. uh,
whoopsie.
yeah, but it was, yeah, and like you said, mate, September 11 happened while I was at Nogra Barracks. That was amazing. I was only recently married then, and got well, I was at home. Everyone's story, mate, looking at the TV, thinking, "What the heck?" Got to work, and then they locked the barracks down for a week, and the old picket patrols, the old fat man's webbing. Well, we have pickaxe or not pickaxes, the pick handles. you had to patrol with those around the Enoggera barracks and all those kind of things for a while. So yeah, it's I guess for a bloke like me and most of us who join the military, that's what it's all about. I'm going, you beauty, we've got another one coming. Let's go. Unfortunately, I didn't get the opportunity to go due to my position, but it was a big push. We started to move into that exciting army that has been the last 20 years.
Yeah, definitely, man. Is that like after that 4 years and about that 2003, after the invasion of Iraq in, I think it was March or whatever, is
Yep.
that was that part of your decision to move into like an arms corps, like MPs?
Mate, I actually I was considering going into infantry, but necessity of looking after wife and child came in, and a bit of progression in my career. I picked up Lance Jack while I was at one field, and then I got, of all places, mate, I got sent to Sydney as a two-div commander's driver, which sounds like a pretty cushy job, and physically it is, but huge hours, mate, and certainly not stimulating for a bloke who just wants to get after it. Driving around a two-star general half the majority of the time. So in that time, mate, I had the Div RSM, which was Warren Officer Kelly, who then I think ASWAP to Major Kelly. Fantastic dude. I said, listen, sir, I'm really keen to get out of here. I think you guys are all nice and lot, but I really would like to do something a little bit more exciting.
Oh, I
And
think the video shoot itself again.
subsequently, he posted me to complete
God
through as an RI.
damn it. Ugh. Hey, Reg, you got me, mate? I think your internet must have shit itself. I don't know if I'm fucking still being recorded. You got me, bro? You there?
Yeah, I can hear you, mate. I just can't see you.
Oh, right, yeah. Now I'm sitting here going, oh, is the podcast just going to be me sitting here going, ugh?
Yeah.
Sorry, mate. The last thing I heard, the whole video not paused. The last thing I heard was the two-star general Kelly. I think you were saying he ASWAP'd at some point.
Oh, so no. So the RSM, so two div RSM, who I've obviously got to travel with a fair bit as well. I said, listen, sir, this is all you're all nice blokes and whatnot, and I understand this job's a pretty important job, but it's certainly not stimulating my needs as a soldier. And he agreed. He goes, yep, you should be doing something else. So I asked to get posted to 1RTB as a recruit instructor. So that
Awesome.
was a big change for me, mate. And I guess the regimental side of things coming from artillery helped me out a lot there. Don't get me wrong, mate. I struggled a little bit in the beginning to put that RI head on. And back in those days, mate, they were the 7-weekers that we were putting through. They were hectic as, mate, and we were working from 5:30 in the morning till 8 o'clock most nights for 7 weeks straight, mate. Like every now and then you'd get the opportunity to go home early if you weren't driving the platoon, but they were probably the longest days and hardest days I did in my military career. And yeah, not good on any families. And that sort of brings me to my next point where I said, right, I only did a year there, and I said, I'm done, and I discharged. And when I say I discharged, I tactically transferred to the reserves and did a DA50, which is basically a contract to the Army in Oki as the Army Aviation Training Centre's transport manager.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's where the military police thing comes in. So whilst I was there, mate, you had 44 MP platoon, which fell under 4 MP company, which was out of Brisbane, which had our military police dogs and our close protection operatives. So out of those, I started to see these blokes doing dog work. I went, oh, that looks pretty interesting. Went over there and had a yarn to a fellow called Stephen Wood, who's now, I think he's the OPSWO for Charlie Company in the military police at the moment. They're working out of Sydney.
What's his name? Sorry?
Stephen Wood.
Steve Wood. Okay, cool.
Yeah, good guy, and a bloke who I still I talk to regularly. And he sort of said he was a corporal at the time, and he told me all about the job, and I said, I want to do that. And that's when I just started the transition. I put my transfer back into the regular army, and pretty much got picked up straight away and sent down to Sydney to do my basic military police course.
Yeah, nice, dude.
Yeah,
Nice.
so
So
that's
tell me about. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
no, you go, mate.
I was going to say, tell me about the training to get into the MPs. Like, what's the role of the MPs at that time?
Yeah, okay, that's a very good question, mate, because it has changed, and it's changed significantly to what it used to be. The basic training, not so much, because we've got to give everyone a complete holistic understanding of what they potentially will be doing when they leave basic course, and it's now tri-service. So you've got your roughies and Navy people in there as well. So at the
Sorry, so that's all of the military police from Army, Navy, Air Force.
correct, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So
gotcha. Okay, yeah. Sorry.
yeah, so when I went through, it wasn't. It was just oh, sorry, no, it was. We did have our tri-service in at the time. But it was at that time we weren't working together. We just went out to our separate ways because that's what's called the Defence School of Military Policing rather than the Army School of Military Policing. But yeah, it was mate. I'll tell you what, it was tough. I guess, and the reason why it was tough is a lot of the people I was with there at the time as trainees were very, very new to the Army, um, and being a full track already, and a little bit of an understanding of what the broader, a little bit better understanding of what the broader Army was like. It was a bit of a tough transition to come down to that IET level and play that IET game. So I did struggle for the first, well, probably month or 6 weeks, and I'm going, oh, what have I done here? I don't know if I want to play this game. But as I started to go through, especially once we met the field component of the military policing, that's when it got a lot more comfortable for me, and where I started to do a lot better rather than all the actual policing, the investigations, and all those sort of things. Because I think at that time, it's longer now. It was a 3-month course, so quite a long time, mate. And to be in Holsworthy down in Sydney to be doing that kind of stuff, and I guess that cultural shift into that tri-service environment as well was interesting. And having that I guess a sprinkle of different corps there. I mean, we had artillery, infantry, a lot of clerks, armoured, lots of guys there from different corps, which made it great because we all had our strengths to bring into that, I guess, all corps environment, which military police is having that ability to, yes, go write a statement, yes, go take an investigation, yes, now you've got to go field and bang in 100 star pickets, which we don't do anymore, thankfully. Oh, sorry, but yeah, there's a lot of different things. But mate, by the end of the course, yeah, I was pretty comfortable being an MP, and then moved into Townsville, into Alpha Company. In my head, mate, my pure focus was to get this GD stuff out of the way and get into the dogs. And I made that very evident to anyone I spoke to ensure that no one ever had any doubt that that's where I wanted to go on a daily basis. So it's because sometimes, mate, as you probably know, is when you're in a unit that's struggling manning wise or struggling to get things done with the people they got, they don't want to let go of people, especially if you're someone who's not a slacko and you're going to do the work. And I experienced that in Townsville, mate, to the point where they said, "Oh, listen, mate, we don't want to put you on the list for the dog course because you'll probably go." And I said, "Yep, that's my intent." So it was a bit tough to sort of convince them. I said, "Listen, I'm happy doing the MP stuff, but my full intent is to go to dogs, and I would really like that." And yeah, in 2008, I think it was. So I was very, very short into my time. Was it 2008? Yeah, early 2008. I went and did my dog course down at Sydney again.
Yeah. So just backing up a little bit, when you were doing like your regular MP time, and you're up in, because were you in Laverack?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're Laverack Barracks, Townsville. Now that's the time when there's a lot of deployments happening. You've got the SecDet in Iraq. You've got some of
Yeah.
the RTF
Yep.
in the early days, and that was probably some of the most intense stuff that Aussies had done in a long time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, as an MP, are you dealing with a lot of the fallout from some of those deployments and the jadedness and the people discharging and the, post-deployment fucking wobbles that people get on? What's the go there? How was that for
That's a
you?
good question. That's a good question, mate. So there's two parts to that answer, mate. So the hardest part for me at that time, because like you're saying, you had the omelets going over your sec debts and all the thing that was happening at the time. And mate, I was literally instructing every single one of them on how to use a pistol and how to do what we call our DTs, defensive tactics, and basically a, a digger level of LOAC in that regard. So it was frustrating for a bloke like myself and the other blokes that were providing that sort of specialist knowledge to everybody that was getting deployed because, we would really like to go, please. But you never got to go. But at the same time, mate, what was happening at that time because that's when we converted. Oh, sorry, we went. Oh, what happened then? That's when we actually became the battalion, I believe. And someone will definitely correct me if I'm wrong when they hear this podcast. But we were providing a general duty policing on the beat with the coppers out in Townsville as well, which was actually quite good, mate. And I don't know, I guess because at that time I didn't think of things the way that you're saying it now, but maybe that was a reason. But Friday and Saturday nights, mate, they were pretty exciting, and we got to get hands on a fair bit. And I guess a bloke as a bloke I used to work with a lot was a fellow called Alan Napier. He was an MP, also a dog handler. He actually did some time as a DLO for about 2 years over with SASR. Now, him and I, mate, for whatever reason, whether we did it on purpose, we'd always end up on patrol together. But yeah, the option we gave people is, listen, you just jump in the back of the paddy wagon, mate. I'll take you home. That's the end of it. I won't need to speak to your RSM. Need to speak to your duty officer. I'll take you home. But because unfortunately the reputation some military police had at the time and still have is they didn't trust us, and sometimes they ended up arrested or whatnot, and we'd have to go through that what I found pretty yucky side of the business was that discipline rather than that supporting it. And, I mean, again, going down that philosophical line again, it was our core motto was for the troops, with the troops, and certainly not against them. And that's what I kept in my head. I'm here to help these guys, not bloody put them in the cells or whatever it was in 2RAR at the time. It was to get these guys home and in a safe place and not given the coppers, because that was the option I said, because we were working side by side with the coppers. They go, hey mate, if you don't pick him up, we're going to put him in the watch house for the night. So we're doing him two favours: getting him off the street, two, getting him out of the watch house and going through that military system. And it was good for the coppers to help us out like that. And mate, it's a bit of a tough because they're like the real police and we're not. And you're going, all right, they made us feel like part of the team. And I remember the first time I went out there with the guys, he said, right, mate, if you're out here with us, you're one of us. If we're getting a scrap, we expect you to be in it with us. I said, oh, too easy. You just need to ask me and I'll jump in. So we had some pretty good times
Yeah.
up there. That's right. But yeah, I don't know, mate. If I was to give one example of a bloke who was probably displaying some of the characteristics which you sort of said, it was a fella that we picked up for possession of drugs. And he'd come back from deployment, been wanting to get out, gone a little bit funny in the head, and he literally flagged our car down and goes, come and have a look in my room. I've got something to show you. Drug paraphernalia and stuff in his room, and he goes, yep, and I'm high as 10 high things. I really need to get out of the army, mate. Can you take me in? So that's probably an example of that.
Shit.
And more in
Wow.
the car, he was explaining, he goes, listen, I've been trying to get out of the army for so long. I just got back from, I can't remember whether it was Iraq or wherever it was. And I said, hey, listen, mate, we'll do everything that we can. And as you know, I mean, we're not there to bust their balls, mate. Honestly, that might be some people's agenda. I just want to get that guy into a safe position, and we all make mistakes, mate. I've made plenty. I don't need someone bloke in the car reminding me of those mistakes. So we just sort of I did my best to look after those guys.
Yeah. Yeah, that must be an interesting thing for you to balance in the MPs because you've got that reputation, and you obviously know the saying, right? The MP, what's the emblem, so to speak, the core
Yeah,
emblem
the
is
government. Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
the two
What's the,
swords, right? And the
yeah,
saying is one sword to fight the enemy, one sword to stab you in the back with, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
What's that like, mate? Being probably a half decent bloke in the MPs and then having to deal with that sort of reputation, and then because you're probably on the back foot as soon as you start interacting with people, right?
Yeah, you're right, mate, and that's been a problem throughout my whole career. I mean, right to the very end, mate. But it's always going to be that barrier that you have to sort of break down, and that's something I certainly pass on to my diggers as well. I said, hey, the biggest problem we have is our patch. I said, but at the same time, I'm proud to wear that patch. But we need to show these people why we are proud to wear that patch, not because we're going to put people away or whatever that, and or stab them in the back and all those sort of things that come up. And so to manage that, mate, and I'll use an example, and this is probably going to go against me, but I'm happy to share it. So, after my military police
Here
dog
we go.
course, mate, that's right. I was lucky enough 2 weeks after I finished my dog course to get deployed to East Timor straight away.
Awesome.
And that's yeah, so I was stoked, and so myself and military police dog Amy, who I was allocated on the course, for her it was her second tour. For me, it was my second tour, but first tour as a dog handler, and so straight away, mate, I was attached to 5RAR TLBG5, part of support company there. It it was at the end of we and I guess what the irregular thing at the time was well was it was four corporals. We didn't have a sergeant, which normally the sergeant's the section commander, because I think there was the intent to draw down and reduce our footprint on the in East Timor, and that subsequently happened the next tour after. But in that time, mate, I guess I got to um, work very closely with the infantry, and the big thing for us was to literally just get in their face and say, hey, when are you going on patrol? Show me your patrol plan, or your schedule for the week, and we'll pick where, or not pick, see where we can fit in to your patrol plan. And we looked after Dilly, Gleno up in the hills, and Bacau over on the eastern side. So for me personally, Gleno and Bacau were my favourite because the cooks there were fantastic, and it was a lot cooler in those locations. But straight away, mate, having the big old school red patch we had back then, that was the barrier put up. You get in the back of the carrier, or back in what are those bloody New Zealand six-wheel drive things, or eight-wheel drives, whatever they were bloody called. Get in the back of one of
No
those,
idea.
and yeah, straight away they sort of you're on the. No one wants to talk to you, or they ask you the standard MP questions like how many blokes you locked up, did you bring your speed gun, all those kind of things. So, but yeah, and my dog unfortunately was extremely racist and didn't like anyone that had darker skin, or so that sometimes worked against me working with the New Zealanders because the Maori population she would cook off as soon as they got in the car. Um, but yeah, it was over. I'll tell you what broke that barrier, and this is what's probably going to get some remarks. Is we went on. We were up in Bacau. We just finished a big trip of basically doing some, I guess, some standing patrols out in the bush with the guys, and for I think it was about 2 weeks. We went from Dili up to Gleno, through to Bacau, and just doing that standing patrols, so on and so on. Nothing more than 2 days, but if you've been to Timor, the country there is quite steep and quite hot and quite wet. But we got to Bacau and we all decided, righto, let's go have a beer. And as you know, that's naughty. So we basically went to a restaurant there and we had a meal and two beers with our meal. And subsequently, the OC or the person, or sorry, one of the blokes that was sitting at another table um, was a civilian journalist, and he went back to our FOB up in
uh,
Bacau and told the OC there. So by the time we
rotten
got back,
cunt.
yeah, exactly right, mate. And I know why he did that because he was giving some two young ladies a bit of grief, and they were over there on schoolies, but they were there as part of a mission, and we sort of identified this fellow as a bit of a predator, and as a result, gave him a little bit of heckling, and he moved along. I think he obviously took that to
What's his
offence.
name?
I don't know, mate, and that sort of gets to the next part of my story. He made this allegation, which is true, mate, and we, being the people we are, yep, we did that. We'll take the kick in the ass, and we then became, I guess, very known in the whole battle group then as the four MPs that got on the piss. So that,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. So, but what happened then, mate, is that barrier broke down. We became part of the team. The guys felt more comfortable. I certainly learnt a lesson. I'm not going to do that to make mates with people, but that brought down that division between us being military police and them infantry. They understood, yes, we still got a core foundation to police the troops per se, but like I used to remind them, that is not my function right now. My function here is to provide you a force multiplier in the shape of a military police dog. If required, military police advice on the ground. So once we got past that little indiscretion, yeah, we got charged. I think we got 2 days loss of pay, but in the long run, it was kind of worth it to break down those barriers of relationship between the infantry and us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess they wouldn't have seen you as these narcs. They're like, oh, these guys were out slaying bulk piss, like we
that's
would have been or should have been or
yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
do. Or
So
yeah. So
yeah,
what was the actual mission for you guys with the dogs? Were you like, was it a tracking mission? Was it apprehension? Was it just force
all,
protection? What was the go?
all of the above, mate. So whatever fell into that box, and if I was to be 100% honest, mate, that was 2008. Um, so being part of a patrol in 2008 in Dili, to me, as a bloke I was at the time, and probably similar to who I am now, I thought we were just delaying that transition of normality for those people. Watching blokes walk around with a 58, a minimi, and styres with a big furry chainsaw down the street just didn't suit the picture, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
These guys, in my opinion, were getting on with their lives. Yeah, we had some minor indiscretions that were happening sort of out of Dili, and most of the stuff that was happening in Dili was probably civil crime that should be dealt with by the federal police or the PNTL. So I guess most of the stuff that we did at that stage, and anyone would agree with me, East Timor became our new training area. A sub one was run over there, a sub two, mate, the SIAS course that I watched get done over there. I've never seen people so um, destroyed in my life when I watched them do that. They ran a carrier course over there. It basically became they even ran a sub one for corporal in East Timor in that time. So for
Jesus.
us, our primary focus was to provide that force multiplier in the case of any public disorder, whether it be riots or whatnot. Provide that tracking capability if required, and any sort of out of court in accord apprehension, which we got the opportunity to do one up in. Oh, I can't remember the place, but it was up in the jungle somewhere. It was probably one of the most amusing missions I'd ever seen, mate, because it was supposed to be covert. It was run by the Portuguese, the GNR, PNTL, Australian Federal Police, with a contingent of, I can't remember, I think it might have been Delta Company of 5RAR was sent up there as the outer cordon, while I think GNR with the strike team. And, mate, if you can think about that many agencies doing one mission to catch three murderers in a little village in the middle of the jungle, I would have a guess we're about 30 vehicles strong, driving a convoy
Yeah.
up into the jungle, and they literally had to. One of the federal police officers had to actually become a parking attendant and put us into a big soccer oval in this village. And so I'm sitting there in orders, listening to what was going to go on, and the only thing I heard that was very important was no flash, no bangs. Just go in there, and it's all got to be very solid, because obviously the village homes over there are made of bloody, I don't know, palm fronds and stuff like that. So the noise is going to travel very quickly at 4 o'clock in the morning. Sure enough, first house they went into, bang. So that resulted in I think they got two arrests and one escaped. Unfortunately for us, none came our way, but yeah, one got
Yeah.
away from that night. But that was probably the one and only real sort of uh, proper task we did on that whole 9 months, mate. So that was a 9 month tour for us, which
Wow,
was
that's long, bro.
too long, mate, too long. But at the same time, mate, it was a good opportunity for me to know my craft, build a solid bond with my dog, because she came from the New South Wales Police as not being tall enough to do the job. She then got subsequently given to one dog handler who subsequently left the military, then became the pool dog for her first tour in East Timor. Then I got her. So she's gone. I could see it on her face. Who's this bloke who's going to be pulling my lead for the next however long? And she was quite an arrogant dog, if I was to be honest. But during that time in Timor, we certainly built a solid bond. And that's what I like to explain to a lot of people when I was a handler back in those days. I said, I slept beside that dog and spent more time with that dog than my wife and family. I said, that's the difference between a lot of people when they talk about their pets. I said, I spend way more time with my work dog than I would a pet. So it's yeah, interesting times, mate. But yeah, I think the best task I did over there again was a training task. This was with 5-hour recon. They were running a sniper course, and we had to track the snipers down. So it was basically escape and evade.
Cool.
So that was basically based off a shot rep. In a little, I can't remember the name of the bridge, but it was a bridge outside of Gleno. We had to go find source scent. So we didn't know where they laid, but we from doing an intruder A or an area search, we were able to locate where we could see where they'd laid during that time, and then a subsequent track. That was the longest track I did, mate. And it was raining. It's in the jungle, very steep terrain, and it was funny, mate. The first turn was down a big bloody gully into a creek, and so I got the recon guys with me and going, "Please be right, dog. I don't want to go down here and go back up." And sure enough, mate, we get down, and she's like, "Nah, I've made a mistake." So we had to climb back up this bloody gully. And I had to recast her back up the top. And lucky enough, one of the blokes who was on the recon team at the time, he'd done his trackers course. So he was able to sort of sit off to the side and confirm odour. And every now and then, mate, because it was raining and muddy ground, I could see for myself that we were following footprints at some of the time. But as you start to go into some of the other, I guess, some rice paddies and jungle area, it got a lot tougher to see that sign. So the dog, she did fantastic, mate. I think it was a 2.3 kilometre track through that area. And the cheeky bastards, mate, we could see where they got to the road. You can see all their footprints, and then no footprints. They got in a taxi. Yeah, but that was probably the highlight for that whole trip. If I was to say, mate, it was actually just the training side of things, and just getting it out and educating the infantry that who we were and what we do.
Yeah, nice, man. And that's so 9 month tour. Was there any other operational incidents that you had, or was it just a fair bit of patrolling and maybe,
Yeah,
I don't know, a couple of barks with some locals?
yeah. So yeah, that's basically it, mate. So we did two. Like I always chose the early morning or late night patrols because I had a long-haired black sable shepherd. So operating
Yeah,
in Dili during the day would just be silly, mate. I think Christmas Day, 2008, or Christmas night, sorry, we're at Bakora Bridge just outside of Dili. I had to call in like a medevac to get her back because I thought she was going to go down with heat, and that's the only time that she's done that. The tour before me, she actually did go down with heat, and they had to put a bag in her ass. And when I say they had to literally put a camel back up her backside because they couldn't get any veins. We've subsequently learned a lot more on how to do those things properly now, but back in the days, mate, back in those days, we kind of made shit up, if I was to be honest. And whatever worked, and we get the advice that we could of the people that are around us. But as for
yeah.
anything that happened, this is what I say to people when we go on exercise. When they go, "Oh, nothing's happening," I said, "Yep, that's just like operations. So just get used to patrolling and nothing happening." So then and be thankful for it sometimes. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
It's almost like you have to train for that complacency and those long periods of boredom, right?
yeah, exactly, mate. Exactly right. Because I mean, like we were doing on average between 5 and 8 kilometre patrols 2 times a day, and it's just more of a. They're always KLEs or sort of a presence patrol. If we heard any of the martial arts games kicking off in the city or whatever, we'd go and show them with the dog. It just reminded me of a story. Day one, mate, I got in the back of a carrier, and so I'll remind you that my dog is very racist and certainly knew what the targets were in town. I got out of the
Yep.
back of the carrier, so as you know, so we're normally last in, first out for the dogs. I'm sitting there at the back of the carrier. We've stopped into our drop-off location with the patrol, and I've hopped out with the dog. And no shit, mate, within, I know, 2 or 3 seconds, she's lashed onto a bloke's ass who's riding past on a bike. So she's just, I've sort of had to rip her off, go, no, corrected her. And old matey's just taken off into the bush. And I'm going, I really got to check if he's all right. And I never saw him again, mate. But that was sort of like, it was good for the grunts to see that because they're going, oh, she means business. I said, yeah, that's not
The
what I
dog's
wanted to do,
serious.
mate. That's right, exactly.
Yeah, but Reg, you got your first operational bite, mate. Don't lie.
Exactly, literally first patrol. So yeah, it was good fun, mate. I mean, and I think we were the second last rotation. The rotation after us was only two handlers, and I think they only lasted 3 months in country before they shut down the dogs in there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
And was that just like a natural part of the drawdown for that particular mission? They were just like you were saying, there was like, people just getting back to their lives.
yeah, yeah,
Dogs are a bit
yeah,
high level, draw
yeah,
them back. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, because I mean, you look at dogs, mate. They are definitely a show of force.
Yeah, very intimidating. And if, yeah, I guess it sort of potentially raises that alertness level of the locals and whatnot.
Yeah, oh mate, and they're scared stiff of dogs over there, and that's mainly because of all the tours prior to, especially during Interfet and such like that. Those dogs, they cause some damage in those rights and stuff like that. I mean, one of our terps, he showed me his scars on his leg and his arm from I can't remember the dog's name now, but the dog handler was Whoppy. He's now a Queensland Police detective. He's yeah, his dog caused a lot of damage over there, just pushing those guys back away from in those right situations. But yeah, so the Australian Military Police dog developed quite a reputation over there.
Yeah, nice, man. Mate, did you ever work with the Perth guys with SASR over in Timor or see them or their dogs?
Not in Timor, no. So I think it might be incorrect, but at that time they didn't have their dogs there at that stage. So I think early days they were using Rafi dogs. I can't remember the name of the SAS major I was speaking to, but he gave me some pretty cool stories about how they utilised the dogs at that time and using other assets to, I guess, find people. And I, as a result of those conversations, I try to push that into our capabilities as well, and that was utilising UAVs in addition to the dog capability. So UAVs, map to ground, cut-offs, all those kind of things that kind of doesn't sit in a military policeman's head because we leave that to the grunts, I guess, to deal with and the tacticians. But we
Yeah.
also need to understand how to advise, and because a lot of the time these guys don't understand what we do, and if we can provide that advice to whether it be the corporal, the platoon commander, on how we can effectively use these dogs using other assets to, I guess, increase success. That's why we really started to bring in those. I certainly pushed it on my guys. Right, you need to understand navigation. You need to understand map to ground. You need to understand likely avenue of escape that guy's gone, so we can send a UAV that way. At the same time, looking for our pull scent at the beginning of the track. And we started to do that a fair bit in training down the track. I don't know what they do now, but we started to get some good results out of it.
Yeah, cool, man.
Yeah.
So what's when you're so it would have been 2009 by the time that trip wrapped up.
Yep.
Um, what's that like coming home from a trip? albeit it wasn't all guns blazing the whole time. What's it like coming home from a trip like that? The adjustment phase.
So that, I guess, that's a good question, mate. So 2009, if I was to give a bit of context, mate, the dog unit at the time was pretty undermanned and overtasked. So getting back, it didn't take long before I was back on the tools and back out bush. So I didn't really have that much time to sort of get my bearings back. But I guess what was different for me as well, I just went from a course straight onto deployment and then back in. I had to move a house and move my family in that time because remember I was in Townsville and now I'm posted to Oakey. So my wife's been basically, I've been away from my wife and my two daughters at that time. Oh, sorry, no, I had three. So one son, two daughters at that time. Um, so I've been away for 3 months on a dog course, come back for 2 weeks, then sent away for 9 months, and then come back home. And in that time, she's moved the whole family and house down to in Toowoomba, Oakey area, southeast Queensland. So I
Yeah.
had to sort of I had to catch up a fair bit on that absence and provide as much support as I could in the home, and that's what I sort of, I'm sure you understand, and that's why wives and spouses and husbands, whatever they may be, in the military certainly don't get enough credit for the sacrifice they make as well as a result of what we do. And so, yeah, I guess I spent a bit of time fixing stuff at home, building sheds and all those kind of things. And I guess the big thing after that was to pass on the lessons learnt to the guys back back at Oakey.
Yeah, awesome, man. So were you now back to full time, right? So you were still full time at this time.
Yep. Yes, Andy. Yep.
Yeah, awesome. And then how did your role change when you got back to the unit at Oakey? Were you just like, were you a corporal at that stage?
Yeah. So we were all corporals back then. So
Oh,
until
yeah.
recently, yeah. So until recently, we bring in diggers. But yeah, I guess my role sort of, I was just basically a shit kicker then because we were all corporals, mate, and most of the guys I was with there had done deployments to East Timor already. Because as I said, the small unit, high request rate. So it was just sharing that knowledge, sharing what I learnt on that tour, consolidating a lot of that stuff I learnt on that tour. Um, Exercises, courses, all those kind of things. And we used to support RMC a lot in regards to their officer courses out in the bush. Most of the time was up in White Bay, so we did a lot of those, and that was our opportunity to develop and I guess imprint our capability to future leaders, and not just in the dog side, but military police side, and hopefully poach some good future leaders out of there to come across to the call. Um, but yeah, I guess that was a bit of a really busy time for me professionally in just getting my craft right. Um, what did I do over that time as well? 2009. So we had the service dog seminar that year as well, which that was the first time I got to go play with all the other agencies. Where it was Queensland Police, the RAFIs. We had Mark Donaldson come over and give us a bit of a spiel as well at the time. Who else we got? So we all came in there and it was
Was
basically,
this
sorry, yep,
so when Dono came over, Mark Donaldson,
yep.
was he a Victoria Cross recipient at that time, or was he just a handler with the Perth guys?
So he was a handler, but he's obviously had his VC at the time, so it was a pretty big deal for him to be turning up and gave us a big spiel on that. It was a big deal for me, mate, because I just literally finished my sub one for sergeant, and he was my topic to bring up to discuss during my sub one. So I just researched this guy,
Nice.
which was very difficult because at that time his past was quite, I guess, a mystery. And I mean, since his book's been released after that, which would have been really helpful for my sub one for sergeant, it's all become quite apparent. But that was I guess a bit of a high point in my career, mate, to meet him and have a yarn. And if you've met him, mate, he's a super cool dude, just quite relaxed. So that was good in itself. And but what was great about that opportunity, mate, was for us as a military police dog capability. You know, when you're doing something, I know. I mean, you guys get to play with a lot of different agencies. When you're the MPs, we don't, and we just sort of think we're doing what we're doing is right, and we had the opportunity to go and play with others and see what they're doing, and it was really, really good for us to see that we were doing the right thing. The capability we're providing, the techniques we were using, and I guess, the capability what we wanted at the end was equal to, if not better than, some of the agencies that were out
Yeah, nice. So a bit of an exercise in validation to see that you're still doing things okay by the rest of the community.
there. Yeah, that's right, and that sort of brings me back to Aaron Barnett, who was what was he, the CSM then? It might have been the SSM at the time. I mean, that guy sort of changed the way that we did um, dog training and our capability, because up until that time, we basically did the RAF course. Up until the time, probably 2 courses before me, we did the RAF course, and we all did it together, and MPs would go do the MP things, and RAFies would go do their RAFI thing. That circle has gone a full circle again. We now do a dual service course again, but there's an Army single service component at the end that goes for 5 weeks. But he completely broke the mold of the old compulsion yank and crank sort of methodology to our negative reinforcement, positive reinforcement, classical and operant conditioning side of things that we're doing. And he's done that purely. I guess his big influences was dog sport, and Michael Ellis was a big one for him as well. And subsequently, we spent
I
many.
love Michael Ellis.
Oh, exactly. The guy's a legend, and so subsequently
I
we
want to
spent a
get him
lot
on
of.
this podcast.
Oh, mate, that would be sick, because he's a good dude, and we watched so many of his videos, and Ed Frawley from Ray Allen and stuff like that. I mean, these are all. I mean, that was, I can't remember, 2008, mate. So that was a long time ago. Things have developed massively, as you know, in this arena. But yeah, it was good to see that those methodologies that he was teaching us outside of what we had as doctrine at the time were certainly, I'd sound a little bit arrogant, but they showed a better result at the end, a better demeanour in the dogs. The dogs weren't waiting for the next correction or being forced to do things. The dogs wanted to do things.
Yeah, that's a good segue actually, because I did want to ask about the methods and how they changed over time.
Mm.
Because like I've had Ben Gertz on this podcast, and we spoke a bit about actually I'm wearing the West Australia Police Dog Squad
Yep.
t-shirt. Because he was obviously over there, so he and I had a bit of a brief chat about that, how the methods changed over time from that real compulsive sort of method from into like the your knee pose staff and the e-collars and a bit more food based and whatnot. Is that similar to what happened? I mean, obviously, your mate Barnett has taken things in that direction.
Yep.
Were you guys Nepopo focused, or was it just more like, hey, this is a clicker and some food, maybe there's a different way?
Yeah, okay. So we've probably moved towards Nepopo only probably the last 2 or 3 years. Sorry, that's a lie, because I've been out of the Army for 2.5 years. So prior to that, probably the last 5 years, we moved more towards that. But again, mate, the transition wasn't I guess, a hard and fast transition. It was sort of gradual, and that knowledge and expertise in that area just started to evolve and become how we did things over time. And I'll talk a little bit more how we formalize that later on so probably closer to the end of my career. But we there became, I mean, it's probably similar in your arena. There's guys within the organisation that are the custodians of knowledge, and also the ones that have the drive and the motivation to share and to push it to the point of it becomes the way we do things. And Barney was one of those, and it certainly, he spread that into people like myself and others down the track as well. So yes, at that time, mate, I didn't. Yeah, we got taught formally because we had to go through doctrine on how to compel dogs to do things, to use that language. But we were also given a number of other ways to train dogs, and that's going down that classical and operant conditioning side of things. And we didn't use clickers; we just used the yes. We were told about clickers, but we never used them. And that sort of progressed later on down the road. But if I was to say when it became a thing, Um, I don't know there was a hard and fast date. It might have been in line with, I think it was 2017. No, not 2017. Might have been much earlier than that. It came in line when we transitioned into the RAF course, and there was a bit of argy-bargy between some old heads back then, and Barney being one of them, trying to enforce that classical and opera conditioning modelling into the RAF program, which was still pretty hard and fast compulsion. But at the end, again, the RAF had similar motivated people who wanted to bring that new way of training. I had I guess the luxury, or not the luxury, the pleasure of instructing on one RAF course, which was great. And it was good to see that cross pollination of, I guess, what was two silos being forced to come together. I mean, I don't believe it was I guess, a nicely agreed togetherness, but it certainly has evolved to that point where we've got one person down there as part of the development team who comes in and instructs on the courses when they come through. But the formalisation, and I'll get to that point now, is of we needed to make it doctrine. And Army military police dogs at the time had no doctrine. So 2000, and I'm jumping ahead in time a bit here, 2018, I think it was, might have been 19. Warren Squizzy Taylor, Aaron Barnett, myself, Christopher Genn, I can't remember the name of the engineer, line officer, and that's embarrassing, but he's a really good dude. He was the capability manager for engineers at the time. We came together to create doctrine. Warren Officer Wood, he was basically the facilitator of it and the bloke who had to do all the typing, and being an experienced guy, had a hell of a lot to offer as well. So we, in that time, created doctrine, and that was not just our training doctrine, because we still had to fall back into the TMP, which is the RAF, but it gave us our consolidation doctrine, and not just that, what we provide, our capability doctrine, because it just wasn't there. And a lot of that influence came from units like 2 Commando, SASR, our other interactions with policing agencies. We broke the mold of this is what military do. We go, well, this is what we took the good things out of what everybody does, and we put it in a book and made it basically fall in line with, I guess, current operations and future operations. And I think what we spoke about in the past was we wanted to train to that A war, the war analogy came into places where we need to get these guys out of thinking we're going to train for Afghanistan all the time, because there's a big push, not a push, bit of murmurs about removing the tracking capability. And I guess I sound like a bit of an old head here, and the old heads that may listen to this in the future would agree with that. Is the one thing that makes us different to a lot of other agencies, is that tracking capability, and no one else can provide that level of tracking that we aim to provide.
Yeah, okay. It sounds like a bit of a common sort of thread in that period, moving from those compulsive methods to food and clickers and whatnot.
Yep.
So for example, when I went through my course, my formal education was like the NEPO system, right? So it was all clickers, layering in e-collars, some very light compulsive negative reinforcement like slip leads and that type of stuff.
Yep.
Did you train with guys like SASR and 2 Commando, or were you just sort of took some of their doctrine and some of their course content?
No, it's funny, mate. They actually stole from us sometimes, which was interesting. But I got to go over SASR and for one of their courses. That was in 2015. And I'll be honest, for me, mate, that was a fantastic opportunity for me. And I learned so much in that 3 months that I was there, outside of what I knew, and it certainly adjusted the way that I think and that I train, and now that I train others as well. The lead hand at the time was an absolute weapon, and just he was a master of his craft, and he loved it. And so it was good to deal with a bloke like that. I think Gertzy was there at the time as well. so it was. So I got to see that firsthand, partake about it. And as you know, mate, us MPs as DLOs, we got beaten up for 2 and a bit months doing muzzle serials and such. But yeah, it was a great opportunity. And post that opportunity over there, coming back, having a DLO down in Two Command at the time called Chris Genn, again, a knowledgeable guy and a good man. I sort of tried to create that
That's when I was
relationship.
there.
Say again?
I said that's when I was down in the cell, and
Oh,
Genny put me through my course.
oh, well, there you go. Yeah, well, that's because I became pretty good mates with Mick Davison then as well. So
Oh
he's
yeah, mixed up, yeah.
yeah, so he's ended up Davo's going to end up coming up to visit on at one time, and again he had Googe, who to date, mate, is probably one of the best dogs I've ever worked in. Certainly a nasty bite. Um, and we got to do a lot. It's sort of cross pollinate what Two Commando were doing at the time with what we were doing, and that sort of, I guess, consolidated a lot of that content that I got to partake in with the SASR. So we then sort of, I think Kieran, I can't remember Kieran's last name, he came up at a later date and did some work with us as well. So we started to establish
I'll probably
those sort
blank
of.
that one out.
Okay. Yes.
I think he's still serving.
Okay. All right. Yep. All right. So yeah, I think he was still. He came up, did some work with us. That was good. Um, who else? Yeah, it was just good to have that, I guess, the ability to talk to them and reestablish. Oh, sorry, not just reestablish. Sort of rambling a bit now, because at that time, mate, and this is like we were sending a lot of people to these agencies. Sorry, to SASR and to Commando, and not much was coming back, especially people. A lot of the people were discharging as a result, or not. So we kind of said, hey, we'd really like you to come and, I don't know, come and play with us for a bit as well, and to share back. And Davo was fantastic in that regard, mate. He loved it. So it was good to have that come up. And the leading hand over at SASR at the time as well, he did that as well. He came over on 2 occasions, ran a full exercise for us there for about 4 days down in Brisbane. So it was good to get that, which we never had before.
Yeah, nice man.
Yeah.
Awesome. And did you take that Nipo style of training, or did you just sort of adapted it to what you guys were doing?
Yeah, so we sent a few guys on the Nipopo course, and that subsequently happened as a result of people being posted down to the two SF locations. But then we started to send people ourselves. And as you know, mate, Nipopo is a different language in itself, and we had to sort of. I remember Scott Parsons, really good man, and a guy that I sort of took under my wing for quite some time up in Darwin, and subsequently went down to Commando to help out. He's now left there. But I remember him coming back and trying to do a bit of stuff with Naka, his dog at the time, Nepo Po wise. And the analogy I gave him, and he eventually came around to it. And at that stage, mate, my knowledge of Nepo Po was quite poor. I mean, he knew a lot more than I did. But I just said, right, mate, you've been speaking English to this dog for however many years. Remember, this dog is 6 years old, and now you're speaking Chinese, and you want him to learn the first day. Right? And you're gonna risk that dog shutting down. As you know, he was a big male, mate, very highly strung and very capable. But males normally go one of two ways. If you put too much pressure on them, they're going to fall over or come up the lead. I said, I don't want to see any of those things come out of this dog. And so the next bloke after him that did the Nepo Po was Foxy, and you know Foxy. He's now with Queensland Police.
Big shout out to Foxy, mate.
Sorry.
I said big shout out to Foxy. He's a
Yeah,
fan of the show.
yeah, he's a good guy, and it's certainly another one of those guys that sort of took under my wing and sort of helped me a lot in the army and outside the army with dogs. So he's yeah, I think he deserves a shout out, mate. He's definitely a good guy. But he done that, and he brought a lot of that back to the unit, and yeah. So has it been embedded in the military police at the time I was there? I don't think it was embedded per se. It was just another tool in the toolbox, and that's I guess the analogy I certainly love to use. Yep, that's cool, but there's not just one way to train a dog, which I think a lot of people sort of get caught in that trap sometimes. This is how we do it. Okay, it's not working for that dog. Let's do this. And I use the analogy with the old people. My dog doesn't like tennis balls. Okay, what does it like? Let's use that instead. So it was good to the last couple of years having the people like Mike Suttle come over, which I had the opportunity to go see. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, he was fantastic, mate, and to see some of the. Again, I'm going to sort of reverse a little bit as to what we were saying about validating training. It was a good opportunity for me watching Mike Suttle do a lot of the stuff that we were already doing. And don't get me wrong, he did some cool stuff that we had no idea about. And we said, oh, we need to start doing this. But it was good to validate some of the training mechanisms we already had in place. So, yeah, I think we're sort of, I don't know what they're doing now in regards to NEPOPO within the military police dog capability, but it wasn't quite embedded when I left.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I think a lot of units have moved to that NEPOPO style of training.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think most of the resistance comes from the use of the e-collar, partly legislatively, partly because it's, unless it's explained properly and the outcome is demonstrated to them, I think they're really hesitant to jump on board with the e-collar.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think the best example I've seen so far is outside of SF was West Australia Police. So I was over there like a few months ago. Had a bit of a dog and pony show put on for me, which is interesting to be the guy that had the show put on for me instead of being in the show.
Yeah.
And I say that in a positive way. I was
No,
very
of course,
honoured to
mate.
have something like that. But anyway, so Gertzie was over there. He was running their capability, and he introduced the e-collar, and the way that they run it was fucking phenomenal. But I think they gave up all the normal sort of resistance points, right? Is it ethical? Does it work? Is the public gonna fucking like it? Do we just fry the dog? Is that how it works? You know, so
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons why people resist that NEPOPO system.
Yeah, agreed, mate. And I've seen that everywhere. I've had similar conversations with the Northern Territory Police and Corrections, and without going into too much detail, some of these e-collars are still treated like almost a weapon, mate. They're locked in a box, locked into a safe, and all these sort of things, and you need to sign it in, sign it out, and I go, goodness gracious. And we've had those conversations, I guess, formally and informally with police officers and whatnot. So of understanding the usability of these and the education piece is that big gap, mate. Is that perception versus education? And I guess what I use Aaron Barnett again, in his words, he said, "You're not going to give a gorilla a razor blade. You need to educate these people before you give these things out to use."
Yes, mate, I 100% agree, dude.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So when I see guys like Jace Kelly and like Marco O'Hare and who else is there, or Ben Gertz, those kind of guys running those e-collar courses,
Yep.
man, I'm seeing a lot more agencies jump on board with that style of training, and I think they're getting a bit better educated. So you're right, it doesn't become a weapon. It's not just like break glass in case of emergency and fucking fry your dog.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's an activation as well as an abstinence tool.
Oh, exactly right, mate. And that's I have the same discussions about prongs. I mean, I'm a big fan of all these tools, mate, and I use all of them. But again, dog to task, equipment to problem. And people use sometimes these prongs where they shouldn't be. Sometimes people are using the e-collar where they shouldn't be, and vice versa. Again, it all falls down to that education and guidance piece. And South Australia where I am right now, mate, e-collars are illegal. You're not allowed to have one. Northern Territory is the same, which is disappointing because you still see people ripping their dog's head off with a check chain and go, what's worse?
Yeah, exactly. You may as well fucking hit it with a brick over the head, right?
That's right, exactly right, mate. So, but again, that just falls down to that education piece and I guess a little bit of politics involved there as well.
Yeah. Do you have a particular type of e-collar that you do run or that you prefer?
I like the Dogtra, mate. Your dog sport Dogtras. I've also been using a Garmin, mate. The Garmin's more of a pet collar, I think I would say, rather than a training collar. But your Dogtra is the one that I use, mate, just the same as the military. The reason why.
Have you ever gone down the? Oh, go ahead.
The reason why I go that way, mate, is I've had one here for 7 years, mate, and it's still going strong. It's given me no problems. It's been bashed around. It's been in the water. I had to change the battery about 6 months ago. But how good is this? The reliability on these things. And I had to teach a lesson to a fellow that, and I learned this lesson the wrong way when I first started getting the e-collars and understanding that negative reinforcement piece, not so much the knee po, but that negative low stim. And I bought this cheap collar and I put it on my young dog, which is about 12 weeks at the time, mate. And I put it in its lowest setting, and that poor little girl did a flip. And it kept on
Uh,
going. So I had to rip this dog off. I said, never buy a cheap collar again. And I had that yarn to a fellow who just came to me for a bit of advice, and he bought a cheap collar. I said, sorry, mate, throw that in the bin. You've got to spend money if you're going to get an e-collar.
yeah, poor man
Yeah,
pays twice, mate.
yeah, exactly right, mate. Exactly. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I don't know, mate. I like that purely because of its ruggedness and its simpleness. I've got 3 levels of 8, and I can work on that.
what about Martin Systems? Have you ever used the Martin Systems one, the Chameleon?
Oh, mate, I'd love that if I had enough money to buy one. I know a good friend of mine who's got one. They look fantastic, and mainly that contact piece, mate. You got that confidence that that's going to be touching the dog's neck somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, mate. I'm making up some pouches for one of the agencies, and I've got the remote, and it's very interesting piece of kit, man. I'm a big fan. I've never actually properly used it. I've never been educated on it,
Yeah,
but just some of the little features and things I see, I'm like, that looks very, very interesting, man. Especially the version 2, or
yeah,
whatever the
yeah.
fucking version is, but
Well, there's
the
more
latest
versions
one
coming.
anyway.
I was talking to my mate who speaks to Pat Stewart a bit, and has had subsequent lessons with him since he's left where he is. And yeah, he's telling me some of the evolution that's going to be coming towards these collars, trying to, I guess, dodge the governance that's coming in especially Europe is probably the most governed area for e-collars. Um, the technology, the usability, and I guess the reliability is only going to get better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and I think they're part of the sort of some of the functions I was having explained to me were like about how they can shut off the stim, and
yeah,
you got to with a computer program that it is legal in wherever you're transiting
yeah,
through, then you turn it back on,
yeah,
and it was interesting, man, the way that it was described. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I
Hey,
think I had the
mate,
same sort of stuff explained to me, and I said, "Oh, well, that sounds bloody good."
mate, talk me through how your military career came to an end. What was the sort of transitional period in there? What were the sort of things that were pushing you toward leaving?
Okay, I guess if you don't mind, I'll explain first what made it so good, and then
Yeah,
how
send it,
how
mate.
that how that affected my exit, I guess. And I'll explain to that point of I guess the creation and the development of the Bravo Company military police dog element up in Darwin. And that was basically post coming back from Afghanistan, where I deployed as international military police supervisor, which I was deployed with the Danes. That was an awesome trip.
Let's go back. Let's go back to that. Sorry, mate. I want to
Okay.
hit. I didn't realize you'd done that. Let's fucking hit that first.
Okay, no, all good, mate. So I went over there as an IMP supervisor, which was attached, or sorry, yeah, attached with the Danish. So I had a Danish deputy chief and a Danish chief, and basically fell under a NATO command rather than the Australian command there, which came with its benefits and also its downfalls. But that was a 6 month tour I did in 2016 at H. Kaya. And probably definitely the first time I've done operational military policing in the capacity of being a GDMP. Noting
Right.
majority of the rest of my career, mate, has been as a dog handler. So if not all, but I guess what strengths I had at that time was being a second commander, having an understanding of leadership and having an understanding of management. So using those tools and I guess the the MRE, I guess we could call it, prior to going of what to expect certainly helped me out. But I got to the good thing about that, we had a lot of influence in the team that I got to take over, which was 4 Australians, and they made that trip a lot more enjoyable as a result. And the Danish guys we had, fantastic and extremely competent professional people. So that was good. Um, Mate, week one, which was a pretty big deal for me at the time, turned into a nothing, but was basically, right, Reg, you're in control. The police station's now yours. So I guess the structure at the time was there was the Australian supervisor, and then there was a Danish supervisor, and we just basically shift on, shift off. And they said, oh, there's a potential or alleged IED on base. I went, okay, cool. So we've gone in to set the cordon and to do all that sort of stuff. And I go into to see the EOD blokes who were Turkish, because it was a Turkish run base. And I said, all right, who's running the show? They go, you. I went, oh, I'm in. This is interesting. I've got a corporal and I've got a bunch of officers and sergeants that I'm telling what to do. So it was quite interesting and a bit of a wake-up call and an understanding of my responsibility in the type of work that I was going to do. And that sort of come in straight away, week one. So that was, that IED turned out to not be an IED, which is great, but we had to go through all the processes of dealing with such a thing. And, mate, it was we were on HKIA, which is a base of about 5,000 coalition and civilian and local forces. And it was our job to police that base. And I guess the level of policing that I'd done at that stage was very minimal. I guess so compared to the level of policing I was doing over there, which included assaults, sexual assaults, suicides.
Jesus.
Yeah, mate, and mortuary affairs, mate, which I had certainly no experience on or no training on. So having to deal with dead guys, mass casualty at the roll 2 there, we had to basically clear anyone that came in. So there was a lot of stuff that I had to learn very quickly on my feet. And if it wasn't for the guys that I was working with, especially the Danes, mate, those guys were switched on and they knew their shit a lot more than we did as, I guess, Australian military police at that time, because our focus had shifted to that close support to combat forces at the time back home in Australia. So we started to move towards that battlefield circulation control, battlefield clearance teams, and basically what we call puck handling as part of the strike force. So we'd moved towards that more warfighter rather than that policing side of things. So we had to sort of put that police hat back on going into Afghanistan. But yeah, mate, I had a great time there. I mean, I got to learn a lot, deal with a lot, had some tough times as well, and sort of some times of reflection. But in the end, mate, it is certainly a trip that I'll always remember, and probably one of the best trips I've been on.
Yeah, mate, I might just have a quick pause in the break, because then I want to come back and I want to hit you with a couple of questions about that particular trip before we move on to your transition.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll have a quick break, mate, and we'll just come back.
Too easy.
So yeah, before the break, we were talking about your trip to Afghanistan. You were talking about the type of policing that you were doing.
Yeah.
And I was gonna ask you about some of the incidents that you were responding to. You mentioned a couple of serious ones like mass casualties, some suicides, that type of stuff. Can you run us through some of those scenarios and what happened?
Yeah, I can, mate. I'll give you, I guess, best I can. So I think the biggest one for me, mate, that was still resonates a little, and mainly because of the personal connection to it, and I guess some similarities in the person I was dealing with was the suicide. So if you think about 2016, that's when the Turkish coup occurred. Noting that HKIA was basically force protection and run by the Turkish military, that had certainly a massive influence on the way that business was done on the base. We had to, I guess, slightly adjust our posture as Australian soldiers within that base, and at the same time, we had to sort of monitor as a policing agency the behaviours, any adjustment in behaviours of the people that were there. In particular, one of the Y1s there at the time, or equivalent, whatever they call them in Turkey, he ended up taking his own life as a result of what we subsequently found out was his involvement in the coup. So I guess the big thing for me at that time, mate, is that was I see. I think I was at the gym when that happened. I was leg days, mate. So I was literally doing squats. So trying to move quickly after doing heavy squats was very embarrassing when I fell over in the gym when I got the
Yep.
call. But once I got
Jeez.
once I got to the scene, mate, it was sort of if there's any indication of all right, this shit is real. That this shit is real was and I got briefed at the scene before I went into the room and saw old mate on the bed. And I guess without going into too much description, but there's not that much to go into, was his room was spotless, mate. He was laid quite neatly on the bed, and he'd you could see where the pistol was, where the entry wound was, and slightly where the exit wound was. Like, I guess if you think about TV and stuff like that and pictures you've seen, I expected a little bit more mess with a Browning 9mm, but it was actually quite tidy. Saw his letter on the bedside table there, and where the round had gone through the wall into the next room. So I went, righto, this is certainly above my pay grade. So me being a general duties military policeman, we had no training in that kind of stuff. So I reached out to our local investigator support, ADFIS, which didn't go so well. I managed to get a GSR kit out, so gunshot residue kit out of them to do the testing, one on the individual who'd taken his own life, and two, the two witnesses that found the body. So I had to obviously eliminate potential murder in that regard and confirm suicide. Letter was on the bedside table of what happened. Obviously, it's in Turkish, so I couldn't read it, but we had an interpreter there who was able to give us a rough idea what was going on. That gave us the idea. But I think the biggest hit for me was he had a wife and 3 kids at home. Done 20 years in the military, and sort of I can start to see the parodies in that guy. I'm thinking, gosh, things must be pretty bad to leave all that behind and too scared to go home to do that. So that was a big one for me, and we had to sort of get that whole investigation done and the body on the plane within 24 hours due to obviously cultural and religious beliefs. And so I had to take charge of then was the mortuary affairs with the Roll 2 sergeant. I can't remember his name, but he was a fantastic guy and helped me out a lot there. And the Danes who were trained in that kind of stuff helped me out a lot. And again, it sort of alludes to a lot of advice I give to everybody if they're in a position of command or leadership. I said, you don't need to know everything. You just need to be able to make decisions based on the information you're getting from the guys around you. And that was a perfect example of that. Was I mean, dealing with this situation I never dealt with before. Yeah, I can make decisions, I can lead, but I need you to feed me info and make decisions on that. And we got it done, mate. We had to work with the diplomats there as well, and they had to do their things as well. But what made it interesting, due to I guess the cultural and religious beliefs, was the Turks didn't want to borrow him, and subsequently we had to move the body. We had to put the body in the back of the vehicle that had to take that to the airport. We were on the airport, but it was basically Australian led that whole I guess repatriation back to Turkey. So that was certainly a big deal for me at that stage. And I mean, I think we're still. I don't think we're even halfway into the tour at that time.
Shit, okay.
Yeah.
So was that just before he was going home? So he was staring down the barrel of going back to whatever was going on in his life and then decided didn't want to do it? Or was it just, shit, okay.
Well, it all went to shit, mate, because they didn't know who was in the coup and who was not back home and in Afghanistan. They all got extended 6 months. And a lot of these guys are on a 12-month tour.
Wow.
So I mean, there's varying issues that may have been at hand, but that guy was basically either looking at a bad return to whatever was the consequences of him being part of the coup, or just the extension of tour. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's always
again,
hard to tell, hey?
Yeah, exactly right, mate. And it was evident we had to sort of keep an eye on everybody at that time, mate, because the whole battle group or their battle group got extended. So you saw morale drop quite substantially over that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what were these cultural implications and the religious implications that made them not want to go near this guy, not have anything to do with him?
It's the suicides are quite taboo.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah. So that was I think the main thing, and obviously they got to be put in the ground in a certain period of time, and without knowing, I don't want to make any guesses, but that's why we had to get it done so quickly and had the full police report done. And I mean, at the time, I can't imagine there's going to be many guys from Turkey listening to this or their police force, but I had a Turkish police investigator there at the time who was trying to assist, who subsequently was just doing completely the opposite. We had to threat to arrest him if he kept on touching stuff in the crime scene. Because I thought this would be good having this bloke here, and they had some Turkey MPs there as well, and I ended up actually developing I couldn't pronounce his name, and our language barrier was quite difficult to get around at times, but he helped me a lot during that, provide that, I guess, that close cordon and crime scene control, and helped me get rid of that investigator. It was interesting times.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
And what was the go with the Advis guys? You reached out to them for a bit of assistance? Were they just cock blocking you, or were they just fuckwits?
Yeah,
Or both?
I'll be as subtle as I can, mate. I just
Fuck that.
I guess the first interaction I had with them, they said, "Reg, this is not our jurisdiction." I said, I know it's not your jurisdiction. I just want someone standing beside me that knows what they're talking about when it comes to investigations. If you wouldn't mind doing that. And without, I guess, no one knowing exactly who and what was there at the time, when that person got to the scene with me, she ran away. And I was like, all right, it's up to me. That was it.
What? So shit, they were reluctant to help you in the first place, and then when they got there, they were like, "Yeah, nah, I'm not in the mood for dealing with a dead body. See ya."
Yeah, well, that's basically that's the approach. I mean, that's the feeling I got at the time, and so we just, I guess, did the best we could, mate. And if I was to give myself a bit of credit in the team, I think we did pretty well considering, and we put a pretty good report together, and we achieved the time frame that was needed, and and again, a part of my job was to manage exposure as well. I mean, all of my Australian team at the time, I only had one on scene, and they're going, "Oh, we want to help Reg." I said, "No, you can go do something else." So just to minimise exposure to that sort of stuff is a consideration that some people got to have in their heads.
Yeah, it's good that you had the emotional intelligence to not want to parade a whole bunch of people past a fucking dead body.
Yeah, exactly.
And because there's always that morbid fascination with death and with anything traumatic, especially in operations. People want to be exposed to some of those things, but probably in their best interest that they weren't.
Yeah, exactly right, mate. I mean, and I think they both thanked me afterwards. I mean, sometime afterwards, but it's I could hear their frustration on the phone, right, I guess. But I said at the same time, it's no need for you to be here. This is a small room, small space. Let's just minimise the exposure.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, but mate, we had another one which was actually quite comical. If I was to be, we got involved with the FBI and CID with this one as well. Because it involved an American coming onto base. And when I say coming onto base, walking from the general Afghanistan into the gate, which is unheard of. Only Afghanis walk through that gate, not Americans. And so that sort of got the attention of, I think it was the Azerbaijanis at the time at the gate, and they've contacted IMP to do a search. It was right on knockoff, so the bloke I set down there was pretty pissed off, but I said, "Hey, mate, just go have a look, go search him and see what's happening." And as a result of that search, found a lot of drug paraphernalia, found that the ID that he had been amended, so it scratched out the expiry date and made it that year instead, so obviously tampering with that. So we brought him in, and I said, "Listen, mate, you're not under arrest. We're just keeping you here for your own protection until we figure out who you are and what you're doing and how you've come to this point." So we took him into, I guess, some sort of protective custody, and said, "Listen, mate, let's get him out of the police station. Let's put him over to our welfare room." And the welfare room, as you know, mate, they've got a big TV there. I had a table tennis, couple of seats, and a fridge full of near beers and whatever. And so we put him on the couch, and I've missed out a very valuable detail here. He's only got one arm, and
Jesus.
I've said to Chongi, who was one of my soldiers there at the time, again, very, very solid human, good guy, and I said, take him over there. I don't know, give him a drink, just get him to chill out and just look after him. And he got in there and he goes, you want to play PlayStation? And gone to hand him the remote. I said, Chongi, stop
You just press the jump button. I'll do the walking around bit.
So it was quite amusing. He was a pretty serious dude, so he didn't find it as funny as I did. But yeah, he said he'd rather sit there and read the Bible, which was great. So I had to develop a bit of a rapport with that guy subsequently to try, one, to source information out of him, and two, just to keep him calm and not to try to do the bolt. And so at that time, as we were gathering evidence, he sort of admitted that we said, where'd you get all this stuff, this paraphernalia? And he goes, oh, it's from a container down in whatever the area was down where we stored our containers. So that container ended up being an Australian-owned container from God knows how long ago, because everyone loses track of how many containers are in there. So it was all medical supplies that he was selling outside. I said, okay, well, that's no good. So we subsequently had to go, and we said, right, we located this container, we'll make this part of our search. I said, have you got any other storage areas on base? And mate, he had dozens of lockers throughout base. So this guy had been doing this a long time. We also found out that the company he said he was working for sacked him about a year earlier. So he'd been flying around on coalition assets and all this time, unemployed, getting paid by someone. So because his job was to check and monitor all the camera systems, security cameras. So more and more we dug into this guy, the more dodgy he seemed, and this seems to be a little bit more high level than what we thought in the beginning. So that's what got us in to bring the CID in. Because he was a civilian, the CID couldn't get involved, so we had to bring the FBI in, and they helped us out. The Danes and us did our best to interview and to extract as much information out of the guy as possible, but we weren't getting anywhere. We did searches of all those things, and as a result, literally chock-a-block filled our evidence locker with all the stuff that he had, whether it be replica weapons, all these other things that he I guess shells, expended ammunition, lots of just weird, nothing really too scary, just weird stuff that was of evidential nature. During that time, he just kept on bugging me. He goes, Reg, I just need you to collect me a heap of maps, give them to me, and let me go. So I can't let you go, mate, because NDS wants you now. And if NDS wants you, you're in a lot of trouble, and I don't think you'll come back. I said, so because they're basically like the Afghanis version of the CIA. So we couldn't just let this guy outside the base, because NDS had basically reached out to the HKI Turks, or I can't remember what it was called, down at Kanok, and said, listen, we need to talk to this guy due to the person that he's been interacting inside. So, mate, if I was to be, I guess, a little bit more lighthearted, this was getting pretty exciting and pretty interesting for a bloke like me and my team, because this was certainly outside the box of what we've been normally dealing with at the time. So, and especially now we were working with the FBI, which, as Australians, I mean, the only interaction we get with FBI is in the movies, so that was pretty cool. And so we had to sort of back brief them as they took control, and they said, how much you got out of him? I said, well, basically nothing. So they just grilled this guy for about 4 hours, and which was good for us, as they got nothing more than we had, and but at the same time we knew nothing more. But I mean, the end of the story, we ended up with about 100 and something page report that we had to submit to the FBI for use in federal court in the States. And I guess in police speak, if I may, we only got one RFI back from the States, and that was basically to take another photo of one of the drug paraphernalia items that had taken up. So the rest of the report went all the way through. So that was kudos to Chongi, my dear at the time, and because he'd done a fantastic job doing that. So, yeah, pretty exciting and comical times over that. That went for about I don't think the whole police station slept for about 24 hours during that investigation.
So, sorry, just I'm just going to summarise this. So, this random dude just walks in through a gate where he normally wouldn't go, right? So he's alerted himself.
Yep.
So you've been alerted to his presence, right? You've gone down and spoken to him. He's got one arm,
Yep.
got like a forged, modified ID.
Yep.
So he'd just been dilly-bopping around Afghanistan for the last 12 months, just running his own rock show, running drugs, selling little trinkets,
Yep.
range produce, fucking God knows what, flying around on coalition planes, probably doing the same shit on different bases.
Yeah, exactly.
This dude's just gone full rogue. It's like it's almost like you see that movie Office Space?
No, I haven't. I'll have to watch it now.
There's these efficiency guys going to this company, right? And there's one of their team members that had been like fired like 12 months previously, but some glitch in the system kept him getting paid, right? So this guy kept going to work. Yeah. So their fix was they were like, oh, cool, we just stopped the payment. He'll work it out eventually. Yeah. It sounds like that's what that guy was doing. He's just like mincing around going, you fucking cunts, like I'm just going to take all your shit and steal drugs.
Yeah. Well, this guy still had access to all the cameras and stuff because that's what he's telling us to do. Oh, my job's to check all the films and stuff on these cameras. I'm going, well, that's a pretty, sensitive things. So I can't believe this bloke's just been doing this for 12 months without his employer knowing that he's still here. So yeah, it was quite interesting, mate. And you're right, he did have other items on another base, so we had to send the Danes to go collect that stuff. But yeah, it was interesting. I would have loved to have seen the other end, how he went in the States, to see what he actually was up to if they were able to find out.
Oh, so you didn't get the full brief about who he was and what he'd been doing. He was just a dodgy guy that had just been mixing with the wrong people.
Yeah, I think it just got so. The big thing that made NDS get involved was the Afghani that he was seen. That the video footage we had, that the car he got out of belonged to an Afghani who used to be a liaison officer for the KNOC for the Turks. So he used to work on base. So because of that relationship, made him very interesting to NDS and KNOC and other security agencies in the area. So, like I kept on saying to that fella, I can't remember his name, but I said, hey, everything we're doing is to protect you, mate. So if you go outside our little protective bubble, you're on your own. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if he'd been arrested by the local cops, he probably would have been like another Rob Langdon thrown in fucking prison for 7 years.
Exactly right, mate. And that's what we're trying to sort of, I guess, help him out. And at the same time, like you said, we didn't get to see the end product, who he was, what he was doing there, and why he was doing it.
That's probably a funny name to bring up, though, Rob Langdon. Did you have anything to do with him at all? Were you aware of his presence in Afghanistan?
No, I wasn't. There was a lady there, I can't remember her name, who was a prisoner. I had a bit to do with getting her. She got handed over to us while over there. I feel embarrassed not remembering her name, but it was quite surreal to see her get off the aircraft. We had a couple of I think it was one commando blokes over there looking after things, and I think it was a joint mission to go get her, and they basically got her. So that was a feel-good story, I guess. And it was quite surreal to see her get this little old lady off the plane, come on to the tarmac to see her get released. And she'd been I guess she'd been captured for quite some time at that time, and I guess the informal expectation was that she wasn't going to come back.
Oh, is this Marianne or Carrie-Anne some sort of hybrid name?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is Marianne.
Yeah. So very interesting, right? My missus was over there at that time with the feds working on that particular case.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So she was
awesome.
back home, I think, by that time that she was released, but she was working on that case just previous to when she had been released.
All right. Well, there you go. Yeah, that was probably, I don't know. It was just an interesting thing to see, and I've got to, I guess, work with one commando a bit, and that's mainly due to entries and exits off the airfield and stuff. But I guess sometimes you hear, I think that sort of leads me to another story. At the time, there was a British company organising some holiday tours in Afghanistan.
No.
So this is on the internet and everything, mate. So they had all these old biddies from the UK and other places getting on a bus and driving
Makes
around
sense.
Afghanistan. And you wouldn't believe it. But that bus got hit by an RPG.
I'm as shocked as you, Reg. I'm as shocked as the rest of you, mate.
It's just amazing enough, though, is they all survived. The truck driver, the bus driver was the only one that was seriously injured. But I just thought, how irresponsible is that? You've now not just jeopardised those people's lives, but the people that have to go and get these people.
Yes. Yeah, that's fucking Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I've seen people do like motorbike tours of Iraq, and I know people have transited through there all. Like my mum, for example, was on the hippie trail in the 70s, just before the Russian invasion, and she was about to go through Afghanistan, and she couldn't because of the Russian invasion. So it's not that uncommon, I guess, for people to tour through war zones, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's just interesting at that time where things are still pretty hot.
Exactly.
It's hard to be in there.
Shit. All right. So did that? Yeah,
but,
go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go on.
I was going to say, does that sort of sum up that trip? I mean, it sounds like a lot of interesting stuff was going on, right?
Oh, mate, there's a lot of less interesting things that happen, and but they were probably the two highlights of that trip, I guess. And I had the opportunity to do a BG task to one of the one-stars that were over there at the time. So that was pretty cool, mate, to see the assets that we put into those kind of tasks, because I can't remember the name of the memorial, but I believe there's the old British cemetery in the middle of Kabul there. And there's a bunch of graves and shrines and, I guess, memorials in there for Australians, Canadians, British, within this one little graveyard there. And so I think it was Brigadier Pearce at the time was the commander. And I can't remember the bloke who I was looking after, which is quite embarrassing. But it was sort of a last-minute sort of job. They needed a CPPO that was sort of in location, and I was lucky enough to be the only other one in country, so I got the job. And the planning and the assets involved to do that was pretty impressive, and certainly opened up my eyes to what capabilities Australia had too. So it was, good for a 20-minute task. The recon type of the part of the job was great to go out there with the Australian Force Protection, and go do that recon task and to work with the Guardian Angels and get them to understand my role, because a lot of people don't understand who CPPOs are and what we do. That was, I guess, another highlight of that.
Yeah, awesome, man. So did you get to work with some of those contractors over there, like any sneaky peeky sort of people, or wasn't really your job?
No, not on that. Not on that trip. The next trip I did, yeah.
Next trip? Oh, Reg. All right. You didn't tell me you'd done all these fucking trips, mate. All right, take me through the next one, bro.
All right, the next one. Right, so I'll just give you a little segue in the middle before I get to the next one. So because it's actually quite important, because it's all about dogs. So I got back from that trip in 2017. New CEO, new RSM, which was Warrant Officer Stephen Taylor and Colonel Pierpoint at the time. Good dudes. They were my OC and CSM when I was in Delta Company as a dog handler back in the day. So I had a good relationship with them at the time. The previous CEO and RSM were Warrant Officer Cliff Bell and Colonel Kurt Sinclair. So to give you just a little bit of context, because I need to sort of shape the story a bit, Colonel Sinclair and Cliff Bell were probably the sledgehammer that the battalion needed. So they came in and basically turned our battalion upside down and wanted us to be that I guess, that link in with an arms corps, that ability to go up the front and directly support and not be a burden to those call signs. So I guess if I was to have one criticism of that time, I don't believe that was advertised well enough to the subordinates, and it was quite shit for quite some time. I don't get me wrong, I enjoyed it because it was we were going back to that green kind of policing, which I loved. But we lost a lot of people, some good people, some people that were sort of no huge loss of losing. And it basically reshaped, I guess, the mentality and the culture of the battalion. So that was 2015, 16, 17. 2018, 2019 was when Squizzy and Colonel Pierpoint basically came to shape that very rough sort of introduction to that world came in. And these were probably the best years of my career in the military, was that 16, 17, 18, 4 years, 19. And it was based around those four people's vision and I guess, direction. And so coming back from that tour, prior to me being in Darwin, we'd been spoken, the concept of having a dog capability in the north had been spoken to for many years. But for whatever reason, whether it be logistic, capability or money, it never occurred. I don't know if you've been at Darwin or Robertson Barracks, but the blokes that are ex-cavalry or cavalry will know there used to be Courage's cage, their big bloody wedge-tail eagle there.
But if you can hear me, just keep
that's
talking.
the old 2-Cav Barracks. 2-Cav Barracks is now occupied by Bravo Company Military Police, one Military Police Battalion. So when I got back, we had the CO and RSM come up and give their normal start of the year spiel because they reside in Brisbane. And they did bring up the concept of putting the capability up in Darwin again. And I am paraphrasing and I'm leaving a lot of details out because I know the most important thing is they said, we want to bring it up here. And I put my hand up and I said, listen, sir, I'm happy to lead that charge. If you give me the ways, means and the funding and the top cover, I'll get it done. And I guess whether it be my relationship with those two people from previous work, they basically gave me that opportunity to do what I could at my level. And remember, at that time, I was still only a corporal, so this was in 2017. And so to create something like that as a corporal, obviously you're going to have a lot of hurdles. Not so much in your world because you guys get a little bit more push, but in a general army speak, we go, well, can you please get your OC or your sergeant to speak to me? But I was able to get around a lot of that, and that was basically from established relationships. And sometimes, and people who know me know I've got a bit of a bullish attitude at the time, and I'll push through whatever is in my way to a degree. And by the end of 2017, mate, we were able to convert that Courage's cage into a dog kennel that had the capacity to have 5 dogs. At a very low cost of about $57,000. So it's obviously not state of the art. So the next thing was to create a capability. Where am I going to get the dogs? Where am I going to get the people? At that time, I was the only dog handler up there. So that came with its own sort of mission. So that was my mission in end of 2017, was to find some handlers. And I found people who wanted to be a handler that were in Darwin, so there was less disruption to the corps by having them in location already. So that time I got Scott Parsons, Emma Malloy, and Matthew Phillips went on the next dog course at the end of that year, subsequently posted into the newly established military police dog element in Bravo Company at the start of 2018. So we had a dog capability, and now we had to make it worth it, and that's where all the hard work and I guess commitment. And as you know, mate, being a dog handler, it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's you got to live it, and if you don't live it, then you're not a real handler, and you need to find something else to do, or you've made a mistake. As far as I'm concerned, and so we had to get those people in that mindset of living the job. And I know that's tough sometimes. It's certainly tough for me to disengage. But we worked hard, and we got ourselves a reputation, and we got ourselves embedded within the battalion, the infantry battalion up there, to a point of being part of their supply chain. And I think I spoke to that last time as a sergeant, that's a pretty cool thing because the nerdy side of things, if you're part of their orbit and you're part of their supply chain, you're part of their planning. You're not coming in off the side saying, "Hey, please take me." And that was the full intent. And it was sort of, we all did this, mate. I did all this, and that's what I admire those two leaders I had at the time being, and not just two. I had Dave Hankin, and who was my OC, who basically gave me free reign and mission command in that ideal. And I don't know if you remember at that time, we did speak a lot of the tactical corporal, and I guess I was being used as one of those at the time. And I just basically spread your wings, Reg, and go do what you got to do, and we did it. And if I didn't have guys like Dave Hankin, the CO, which was Colonel Pierpoint and Squizzy at the RSM, who didn't give me that mission command and that, I guess, loose reins, I don't think we would have achieved it, because we would have had to go through that bureaucratic nonsense, and that would have certainly halted things. So don't get me wrong, mate, I did upset people along the way. I might have made some enemies and certainly made some good friends, but we got there, and that's it was probably one of the best, if not the biggest achievement I had in my military career, was to stand up a capability that was embedded in an infantry battalion within 2 years. And what was comical about it one day is because at that stage we fell under 17 Brigade rather than 6 Brigade that we do now, and the 17 Brigade commander came up, and as part of that I had to give a military police dog briefing. And he was up in the headquarters, and I've given my brief, and he goes, I said, "Hey, do you want to have a look at the kennels?" And he's gone, "What kennels?" "The dog kennels." He goes, "Where are they?" "They're just out here." He goes, "I don't know these kennels." I'm like, "Uh-oh." So, I've just dubbed the CO in. So, yeah, but he was a pretty cool dude. I mean, he's Ramey, and so pretty lax guy. I mean, I think he spent the next half an hour just taking the piss out of me in the kennels, to be honest. But yeah, that was 2018, mate. I guess the special thing for me at that time wasn't just creating it. I physically built it, mate. Like I physically, along with the whole company, mate, because I got them up there. They dug the foundations. They myself and the CSM put all the did all the prep for the concreting. We done so much physical work ourselves, and sometimes getting at work 5, 6 o'clock in the morning to do that stuff before work, before PT. So it was having that ownership and that I guess control was what made it so, I guess, awesome over that time, and having that ability to get that support and help, whether it be from subordinates or superiors, was even better. It was sort of removing those boundaries or those silos of rank and position, and just getting in as a team and getting it done.
Yeah, mate, I think that's a good point. Hey, I think that having a mission, having a purpose and an end state, having autonomy, and then having everybody on the same team doing the same mission. I don't know why they don't. That isn't the SOP for everyone. You know what I mean? I think they always change that mission, and there's every 2 years the command team changes, and the mission priorities are different, and command priorities are always different, and there's shit culture pushes people out, and but yeah, it's funny, mate. Like, having a mission and a purpose and having autonomy is, I reckon, is so important, man. That's why I think SF are so good at that sort of stuff, because they've got a mission and they've got autonomy. You've been selected on your attributes, and you had your skills developed, and now it's your turn to go and achieve that mission, and you know what that is. Yeah.
And there's a lot of trust in that, though, if you know what I mean. And I guess there was some passive shaping going on in the background by through some PMEs by Squizzy and Colonel Pierpoint. They were getting, like, at that stage, the CO had a readers list, and senior NCOs and junior NCOs, or those in leadership positions, had to read these books. So these now become a huge influence in my life. People like Simon Senek, Jocko, what's his name? So reading books like Leaders Eat Last, Team of Teams, and Jocko's obviously what's his extreme leadership or ownership, or whatever it is. Yeah, they were fantastic things, and they're now things that I share in my civilian employment to some of my subordinate bosses and even my peers and above. I go, hey, read this shit. It's this stuff is not. It doesn't just work in the military. This is why these people are selling it to big executive companies, corporate companies, is because it works.
Yeah, 100%, mate. Yeah, that's interesting that
Yeah.
they're giving you like a reading list. I know that some echelons of the U.S. Army have, like West Point, for example, has a big long reading list. And I've read a couple of
Mhm.
books on that list. I think that's important, man. I think that's important to learn from the past and those really amazing people. I mean, Jocko, for example, he's still pretty relevant
Yeah,
because he was only in the SEAL team a
yeah,
few years ago.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's I think it's important. I mean, no, I guess the one rule I had, the one rule I had when I worked trying to mentor my subordinates especially once I stepped up into that sergeant role and I guess, adopting that mentor role was passing those reading lists on and saying, hey, there's some really good gold nuggets in there. You get into it. When I said to these guys, I said, right, I've got one rule here. All right. Rule one is probably similar to your guys: is look good, and I don't mean just look good in the manner of your hair's looking great today, but your shoelaces are done up, your uniform is in some good condition. Whenever you're in front of someone, you're doing the right thing. Whenever you send me a product, you want to look good. All those kind of things. I said that's because that is literally 3/4 of the battle. The rest is pretty simple because it becomes habitual, and that's when I sort of said, know your craft. Know your craft, then share your craft. I said, that's it. That's all I
yeah,
expect you to do.
yeah. A mate of mine had a similar sort of saying. He says, "Rock up on time and shave. Someone else will fuck that up."
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Well, if you do those things right, the rest comes simple, doesn't they?
Yeah, I mean, I never did either of those things right, and I still don't, obviously. But I'm
Oh
stubborn,
no,
so I just got through anyway.
no,
Yeah,
no, fair enough, mate. As long as you get the
yeah,
job done, eh?
yeah.
That's the thing.
I'd
Yeah,
like to think that I'm some super
but
efficient machine that cuts out the bullshit, but I'm not. I just I just like the cool stuff.
yeah, mate, believe me, I'm a big fan of the shiny things. So I really do enjoy the shiny
Mate, I'm
things.
all about shiny things.
They easily get distracted by
Yeah.
it.
Hey, mate, can you just cycle your
But
video? Can
yeah,
you just
mate,
turn your video on and off just for a second? I just want to see if it goes on and off because I can't see your video's turned off.
I've done that. Did it come
Nah,
back on?
it must just be a loading thing. Ah, it's all good because you cut out before for a minute, so don't worry about it. It's all good. I think it'll just load up when the fucking video keeps going.
Okay.
So mate, talk me through your
All right.
next
So,
trip. Talk me through that. What year was that, and what do you do?
all right. So next trip was 19. So I got deployed as the IBG to JDF 633 commander out of UAE. Obviously, that it extends to the greater Middle East region: Afghanistan, Iraq,
Yep.
Bahrain, Qatar. Excuse me, those kind of areas. Even got to do a little trip into Cyprus there for a bit. So that was my first real CPP job. And I'm going to go back slightly because I haven't probably introduced the fact that I did the CPP course, which kind of happened by accident as a result of me going on exercise long look in the UK. Ended up in Germany, but I'll make this very brief. But in that time, I got there and said, right, you're on the CPP course. So I started to train hard, mate, because the CPP course over there is proper horrible. And the Brits really, really enjoy
Yes, they
running
do.
a lot.
Tabbing.
Um,
Fucking
exactly, and
psychopaths,
Tabby.
mate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. so so I had to then subsequently, after about 3 weeks of training hard, they said, "Oh, Reg, sorry, mate, you won't be going." So what does a bloke in Germany do when they're told they don't have to prepare for an arduous course? He goes and gets on the piss and eats lots of bratwurst.
Nice.
So that's what I did for the next couple of weeks. And they said, "Oh, Reg, we got you back on that course." I gone, "Oh dear."
I look like a sausage.
And they exactly. So I had to sort of get my head back into things pretty quickly and got a huge understanding of the bell curve of fitness during an arduous course pretty quick, or not quickly, probably about halfway through the course where I started to not hate my life every day. But yeah, I went and did that CPP course in the UK, subsequently come back with an international qual. that didn't get picked up by Australia until, coincidentally, in 2018, the OC of Longmoor, the CPU in the UK, laterally transferred and became the 2IC of Battalion, recognised me and said, "How's your CPP stuff going?" So it's funny you say that. They didn't recognise my qual. And he goes, "I'll fix that." And he fixed it within a week. So lucky enough for me, mate, the following year I got deployed as a CPPO to JTF 633 Commander, who I got to have two while I was over there, which was Rear Admiral Hill and then General Coyle. Both great, both different styles of leadership and different approaches to doing their job. But I certainly had a great time, especially supported by the CWO over there. One officer Hurley, who is also Navy, fantastic guy, naval clearance diver, and just an absolutely genuinely funny and good human, and quite capable as well. So having a guy like that to sort of sit by and sort of bounce ideas off rather than a general was really good. So in that time, mate, I was obviously in the UAE, based there, and flew out every now and then into those different locations to do our job. But I did have the ability to work with the two shop a bit and the contractors in there in getting that, like you said, that sneaky peeky stuff, and that sort of gave me a much better holistic understanding of the assets and what we could do in some of those areas we were operating, especially Iraq. So that was an eye-opener for me, and I guess again, a guy that didn't have that much exposure to that, pretty exciting. And I felt like a school kid sometimes going into those conferences and going, "Oh, this is pretty cool stuff. This is real. I can't believe I'm sitting here listening to this kind of stuff." So, yeah, early days, mate, under Rear Admiral Hill, not too many trips into Iraq, Afghanistan, but the one that we did, which was a little bit scary, and I won't go into overly too much detail, but was after what's his bloody name? Soleimani was
fucking drone
taken
strikes.
out. Yeah, that's right. So that was an interesting one because we were doing regular visits to Taji at the time, and the SF unit in there as well, just for visits and obviously whatever the generals got up to while they were there. But Taji was a big place just to show our face and visit the soldiers and stuff there. And coming back into country after that was a whole lot different. The demeanour, the feel of the public. I mean, what was normally pretty friendly and open-handed, waving, all that stuff, all that kind of stuff changed just in a week. And I think our boss at that time, because if you think about it, at that time, everyone left. Basically, everyone got literally strapped into C-130s and C-17s and got sent to Kuwait or wherever they went. So it was pretty light on when we got back on the ground until everyone started to come back. And so it was, and that was as a result of obviously the Iran threat of retaliation. And we've come back in as we do, and gone to Taji and to meet up with the school and the Iraqi and the Australian soldiers there. And that's probably the first time I ever felt like I was there doing the job properly, and that's going to sound quite unprofessional and a little bit complacent, but it was the first time where I realised that I have to put myself in front of someone in case that someone's going to threat their life. And because of the feeling I got at the time at Taji, and probably people are going to laugh at me when they hear this, but it wasn't its normal friendly nature. And where people didn't carry weapons at times, they started to carry weapons. When I say the people, I mean the Iraqis. So I remember we were in pretty close proximity at the school one day, and this is where that dawned on me, I guess, as a CPPO, whether the threat was going to happen or not. I put myself between a threat and the boss. And I know if that threat did engage in the I guess maybe what I thought was going to happen due to his demeanour, that was my job, was to make sure I put myself in that. But before then, that hadn't really sunk in. Yeah, it got thrown at our faces all the time on course and then prior to and in all our doctrine and stuff. But until you actually do that for real, you don't really understand. So that was probably 3/4 into the trip where that happened, and it made me probably a lot more professional moving forward after that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that the
Yeah.
Soleimani drone strike. For us here in Australia, we're probably just like, another fucking Arab just got fucking drone strike. But for them, it was massive, right? Particularly
Yeah.
because of the Iran situation. And
Yeah.
previous to the recording, I said that I fucked up one of my guest intros one time, and I said he was a Ranger instead of the 82nd Airborne. That's a guy called
Yeah.
Chris Ramirez, right? And him and the 82nd Airborne got reactivated to deploy to Taji. So he was there at the same time because
Yeah.
of that Soleimani thing. So um, I
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from when you say that things were pretty serious. Because, like
Yeah.
I don't think we probably don't give it enough credence here in Australia because we don't know much about it, and that includes me. But it was a pretty serious event, man. Like for the
Yeah.
82nd Airborne to be fucking uplifted and then flown over to Taji, albeit they didn't really do a lot, but it was a serious event, man. The threat was real.
Yeah. They took all the gym space. That's for sure. Good time. When they turned up, mate, there was no
Oh,
space in the
right.
gym. It
Oh, so
was
you
pretty
remember those
crazy.
guys being there?
Yeah, but yeah, I do. Yeah, because they turned up very, very soon after when I went. So I'd done 2 subsequent visits after that event, and they were there, mate.
Interesting. Yeah, cool. That's funny. You've
Yeah.
you've overlapped. Like the more people I interview, the more intertwined a lot of the stories get. Like I said, you're in Afghanistan, same time as my missus, and in
Yeah,
Iraq with
yeah.
Chris. So
No, yeah, it is interesting that way, mate. And it's funny you say that. How many times I've been overseas, whether it be, it's always for work, but whether it be in a war country or not a war country, I run into someone that I know or I know of, and that's been somewhere I've been before. And that's, I guess, that's the army thing or the defence thing. Maybe you get around that much and meet so many people, you're going to run into each other
yeah, well,
or have overlapping stories.
I always say, mate, the world's a small place, but the army's even smaller. So you tend to sort of like I've run into guys from 3rd Battalion or 2 Commando when I've been overseas on holiday, like in New Zealand or Thailand or fucking Fiji or somewhere. It was like, hey, bro, there you go. So it's funny like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, mate. But and that's what's good about it too, mate, because there's always someone to talk to in there.
Yeah. You feel how connected the community is. So, mate, what was that? Was that sort of about the height of that trip?
Yeah, it was, mate. I guess what was also really good was having that ability to have 2 commanders and see the differences of how they operated, especially when General Cole got there. She was a lot more out and about visiting, but what stopped that put the brakes on that pretty hard was COVID. So obviously I was in the UAE when COVID hit, mate. So that locked us down pretty hard, and I remember just sort of starting to get the cabin fever, mate, in that small little base at the UAE, and I just go, I've got to get out of this place. And the boss came in, and she was all quite tender, and she goes, "Oh, Reg, I need to have a chat with you." And she goes, "Oh, I've had to make decisions on people that aren't really needed here at the moment, and due to my lack of travel and I can't get out of this base, there's probably no reason for you to be here." I said, "You beauty, thank you, man. Let me go." Because sitting in there on that base, mate, it just, I know, you just want to. I'm sure you understand. When you're not doing your job, mate, that's when silly things start to come in and RSMs start to get very busy.
Yeah, mate, exactly. And I had another guy on the show. I know I keep talking about my other guests, but he was talking about what Taji was like when there was not a lot going on and there was very inwardly focused. So I totally get it, man. If there's no external threat or no external mission, the focus becomes very internal, and it's all about sleeves rolled down and shaving and fucking haircuts, and that must suck.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly. And that's about it, mate. So I guess I left a world that was quite, dare I say, normal, coming back into Australia, going to quarantine in Darwin for 2 weeks after. So I was basically like a caged bear, if I was to be honest, in that little room and not feeding me enough. But I mean, they're all the little things that we shouldn't really worry about. But at the time, they seemed like a pretty big deal. And then moving into a workforce that I guess was pretty normal at that stage for people in Australia, that working from home and all that sort of stuff. And I come back to work and wanting to just get back into training dogs and training people, and that stopped. We had to sort of take it in turns, and I could see the dogs were either getting fat or skinny and all that. And the lucky thing about my position, I was able to stay at work for some time I could work from the office in line with the restrictions that we in. It was just the soldiers that we couldn't interact. So I felt like my hands were tied at that time and trying to get things happening. And obviously we had our other commitments, whether it be infantry, whatever, non-core, of all this border control stuff that were continually taking my soldiers away. And that was a frustration in itself, because we've also got dogs that we need to look after. And then at that, we had a new command structure as well when I got there. And that was a little in various levels of command, be it the platoon commander, sergeant, OCs and CSM, all different, and had a completely different mindset to what I was used to and what I had, which made my transition from that tour a hell of a lot more difficult than it had ever been before.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, it's funny you mentioned that sort of those institutional things. I find generally that's the stuff that frustrates people the most and pushes the most people out of those organisations. Yeah. So is this sort of the beginning of the end of your military career? Why you've decided to start leaving?
Yeah, it certainly is, mate. So that basically happened. So obviously I had, as you got your blokes that are loyal to you and all that kind of stuff that kind of want you, definitely want you to hang around, and due to the level of training we were doing at that stage, and we were doing some pretty cool stuff before, and then we started to get back into a pretty good run of things when I got back, and all those sort of things, like you said, that institutionalised mindset and governance and all the other stuff, which is important, especially in my current employment. But I thought it was basically my Achilles heels to create what I sort of spoke to very early in this conversation, was that training to apply violence on an opponent in the interest of Australia. And that's all that was ever in my head. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, not this other stuff. Can someone else do that while we do this, please?
Yeah.
And whether that be ignorant and arrogant to say, that's how my head worked at the time, and probably still does to a degree. And so I had all those, I guess, internal, battles to deal with that resulted in me sort of getting angry at times, getting sad, I guess striking out a bit, not physically, but verbally and with my actions at times. And I started to realise that, I'm sorry if I'm going down a personal point here, but I started to think, I don't believe this is my place anymore. And I'm sure you've heard it from many people, this is not the army I joined.
Yeah.
And it hadn't been the army I joined for a long time. But I guess I kept myself protected by a bunch of people that I kind of picked and influenced to be around me, and I guess influenced those commanders and subordinates around me to, make me feel comfortable in the army that is today. But I didn't have that anymore when I got back from overseas.
Yeah. So when did you actually make the decision to leave, and what year did you get out?
So 2020, mate. So that was September, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, September.
Shit.
Yeah. September 2020, I decided to get out, which was a surprise to my wife because I didn't tell her. So I basically told her, I said, I put me discharge in, I can't play this game anymore. And as much as I love the guys, and I felt that was probably the most hardest part of the battle, was because you get the diggers going, oh, Sergeant, we really, really need you here. And I'm not trying to fluff up my own ego there, but that's exactly what they said. And I'm going, it made it really hard, mate, because I'm going, oh, well, I've got other things. I've got Reg to look after, and I've got my family to look after. Right now, this is not the influence I need in my life. So I had to make that decision to say, sorry, guys, I've got to go. And that wasn't an easy decision, mate, which I'm sure you've gone through yourself. That was a tough deal. I said, that's 21 years, mate. That's a long time in the military to make that disconnect. But I was confident I'd be able to make something of myself outside, and without a job, I discharged. I had 3 months leave up my sleeve and managed to get employment pretty quickly and started in the health and safety world
Yeah.
after that.
Well, mate, talk me through initially leaving. What's that like after 21 years? Did you stay on long service for those 3 months, or you just went straight into work?
You know what? It's funny. I pass this advice on to everybody. If you've got long service, use it. Don't go straight to work, because I'd literally just done a 6-month deployment, got straight back into work, and then discharged and started a job 3
Oh,
weeks
right.
later.
Okay.
So I took 3 weeks off, but I hadn't really decompressed, if you know what I mean, at that stage. So I just went straight into work, and it was hard, mate. Those mannerisms, those attitudes, that cultural sort of indifference that we have to the normal civilian community doesn't go away, mate. It's still with me, and it still will be probably till I die. But that was a bit of an adjustment going into a civilian workforce so quickly. What made it a little bit easier is I was in construction, which are certainly not bloody choir boys, so it made it a little bit easier doing it that way.
Yeah, probably a bit more rough and tumble, a bit more your crowd.
Yeah,
Yeah, awesome,
exactly.
man.
Yeah. So that was but at the same time, mate, I created what was canine territory. We sort of started as I trained dogs, developed dogs and sell them. At this stage, I sold a dog, Alo. She was the first dog I sold in 2012. She sold Northern Territory Police. Very, very good dog. She ended up getting a couple of commendations for her
Shit.
time as a dog with the Northern Territory Police. She only passed away a
Oh,
few years
right.
ago. Her handler was Chris McKellar, good guy. I still talk to him. He's no longer in the
Okay.
dog section. I've got another dog called Bruce, who I sold to Northern Territory Corrections. Fantastic dog, Malamile. First Malamile I trained from
Nice.
scratch. Just an absolute buffhead and loves to chew. So good dog. And the other one was Anakin, I just sold to Neptune Private Security Mob up in the Northern Territory as well, who was an accident between one of my dogs at home and Bruce. So it was a crossbreed between Mal and Shep, and ended up turning out quite well. So he's doing a pretty good job with Neptune Security in the Northern Territory, as far as I've
Yeah,
been
cool, man.
told. So on top of that, I really can capitalise on a lot of the stuff I learned, especially, and I alluded to at the beginning, from SASR, from that serial-based or scenario-based training. And so I started to develop, I guess, a package, a decoy/serial-based training package that I started to, one, give to my guys in the Army, and two, Northern Territory Corrections were the first ones to pick me up to deliver that package. It went really well. And then subsequently, Northern Territory Police brought me in firstly to do all their certification for all their dogs. So as a third party, so there's got that transparency that they're not just passing off their own dogs and handlers. So I did, I think, 2 runs of that, and then they asked me to come in to deliver that decoy/serial-based training package. So that's the kind of area I want to move towards in the Canine Territory brand, is that training methodology side of things.
Mate,
Hello?
yeah, still there?
Yeah, gotcha.
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry, the audio. I was like, oh god, the audio's about to fucking shoot itself. Yeah, yeah. Well, it just cut out at the end, so I thought it trailed off. I was like, what's going on? Because your video's not playing on my end either, so I was like, fuck. So yeah. So
Okay,
no,
so
I heard all
yeah,
of what
go
you
on.
said. So is that what you're
Yeah.
doing now? Are you going into the consulting world? Are you you've already got a foot in the door, really?
Yeah, that's my intent, mate. So at this stage, yes, I guess I've got a foot in the door still informally with the Northern Territory Police. My good friend Stevie Dalrymple up there, he's one of the senior connies who's sort of taking control of the training and I guess procurement of dogs and stuff up there. And we keep constant contact. And but my intent is hopefully in the future is to make contact with similar agencies down here, whether it be South Australian Police, South Australian Corrections, or whoever it may be. I guess that's where I feel comfortable, I guess, in those agencies, rather than that civilian-based level stuff where you're dealing with pets and such, which I don't have a problem with. It's just I guess for satisfaction and something that I believe I've got a lot to offer is that serial-based training side of things in that government aspect side of things.
Yeah, definitely. That's similar to me, mate. Like, I moved out of the pet stuff into the mostly government stuff now, and that's where I feel more comfortable as well. So I totally get it. I think it's a good decision.
Yeah.
I think you're probably in the right place, man.
Yeah, I hope so, mate. I mean, if not, it's been a good break. I think I spoke to you offline about having about 12 months to not live dogs. I mean, because I've lived and breathed it for so long, I didn't want to risk it being a chore, and that's why I sort of made that conscious decision, which has been very difficult, mate, not to get back into it. But I said, I just need to give, one, my family some time, and two, me some time to just reset, redevelop, and refocus once we get going.
Hey, mate. It just shit itself again.
It dropped right out. Oh,
yeah, sorry, mate. It fucking shit itself again. I'll just edit all this shit out, or not, because I think it was just me sitting there. Because I went on Instagram. I was gonna message her because I'm using my phone to fucking to talk to you. So I was like, I can't text him. Anyway, sorry, mate. Before the video and audio shit itself, mate. What were you talking about? You were talking about the forming relationships with the cops down there in South Australia and looking to get in the contract consulting sort of world. Sorry.
Yeah, that's my intent, mate. Just not entirely sure how I'm going to achieve that at this stage. But hopefully, I've done a little bit of work with the Staries prior to. I'll hopefully make that reconnection and meet up with the doggies.
Yeah, nice, mate. I think that'd be a really cool thing to do, bro. My audio still coming through okay? My audio still coming through okay?
Yeah, it is, but I'm echoing, so I don't know what's going on there.
I can't hear it on my end. We'll see how it comes out in final recording, mate.
Okay, good.
Alrighty, dude. Hey, mate, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, Reg, and if they want to look at a bit of consulting work or just ask you about your career or just have a chat and say g'day, where do you want them to reach out to, bro?
Well, mate, the easiest way is Instagram. I guess look up K9T, the handler. That's the best way to get me. If not, through many contacts people have, we all interlink at times. I'm sure you'll get a hold of me somehow.
Easy, mate. So K9T is it _handler on Instagram?
Yeah, that's
easy.
Right.
Done, mate. Hey, look, dude, we'll wrap it up there, mate.
Yeah.
But dude, thanks so much for coming on, man. I very much appreciate your time. And that was a good chat.
Oh, it's been
mate,
awesome.
you surprised me a whole bunch of times in that convo with a bunch of stuff you did. And I was like, hey, didn't tell me that. Like, then my next trip. What?
Oh, it's just going to be a surprise, mate.
No, it was good. It was.
I really appreciate it, mate.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Hey, thanks for coming on, dude. I'll press the stop recording button, but don't hang up. Easy. Ciao, mate. Thanks for listening to that episode of the Origin K9 podcast. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, subscribe to the YouTube channel, give us a rating on your podcast platform, or go to origink9.com for our tactical canine equipment, which includes collars, leads, harnesses, and merchandise. Thanks for listening, guys.